Okay, I think we'll slowly get started. It's almost 10 after 11, and we'll kind of go through some um, a few housekeeping items for the conference. First and foremost, I want to make sure everybody can hear us, so let me know if there's problems with you hearing or audio or connection or chat. Feel free to put in the chat any questions or concerns that you may have this morning. Um, we as I said, we have 156 people registered. As you know, virtual events are always tricky because it's people join when they want and they hang out as long as they want, and that's okay. That's the purpose for today's conference. The only thing I will ask all of you, if you could, is if you need to take a break or you have something scheduled, that's fine. But if you could try and in the very least come back near the end of the day, just because it's a little demoralizing for people who are presenting at the end of the day to have everybody disappear. So if you could make an effort to try and um, you know not leave near the end of the day, that would be very appreciated, especially for the workshop leads that are at the end of the day and the alumni. That would be very kind of you all. So first and foremost, welcome to the conference. This is our first inaugural conference that we've called Impact Med 2024. The title of this conference today is Innovations in Medical Precision, Accessibility, and Collaborative Technology. The intent of the project, and I'll go through it when I give my little welcome presentation, is to support a program here at the university called Global Classrooms. So that's the purpose of this conference. Are we planning to make this a yearly event? Yeah, I think we'd like to if we can. We'll see how today goes and see what the interest is. So you guys are welcome and encouraged to please provide us with some feedback. That would be greatly appreciated. You can email it directly to me or to any of the organizers. That'd be wonderful. Um, the For housekeeping, generally what we would expect really is during the conference you generally would not keep your video on. You can if you want to. It's just more for those people who are presenting or the panelists. It's easier to see them if they're the only ones with the video on. Also, please keep your microphones muted unless you would like to ask a question, of course. You can lift your hand to ask a question. You can put it in the chat in either Spanish or English. We have Professor Giancarlo from the UCR who is here for the entirety of the conference, and he will be more than happy to help translate your question or comment for the rest of the gang, the rest of the conference, who are, I would say, it's interesting. I would say about half are going to be from Toronto, and the other half is from um, the UCR and in Costa Rica and UNILAP in Mexico. So it's actually kind of nice. It's a pretty even split. We'll see who shows up and who doesn't. That might change the split a little bit, but that's okay. Um, what else? I am recording the conference, so please be mindful of that when you are engaging in a public forum. What you're asking, your questions, or what you're saying is recorded because we're going to make this conference available to people who would like to view it. If someone unfortunately was not feeling well and was not able to attend the conference, they will be able to watch the recording. So please keep that in mind as well. I think that's probably it, unless anybody has any really important questions or concerns they'd like to bring up now. I'm going to get started because our first panel starts at 11:30. And so I'm just going to give a few words of encouragement to get us started. And I'll take it away. So let me just double check everything is okay over here. Press OK there. And yes, I think we're good. So I'm going to get started. You can all see my screen. Wonderful. And you can all hear me. Fantastic. So once again, welcome to the conference. Uh, Here we go. So who am I? I have the privilege of being a professor here at the University of Toronto. I'm the director of data science in the Department of Medical Imaging. That is my primary appointment. I'm also the director of EDI in the Institute of Medical Sciences that I'm appointed to. And finally, I'm an associate professor in the Department of Statistical Sciences. So those are my appointments. I have some disclosures. I'm not going to harp on them. So I'm in industry. I run my own company and I consult for many other companies. So there are my disclosures. Um, I've already mentioned just briefly at the beginning that I'd like to just put a little plug in for Global Classrooms, which is a program at the University of Toronto. And this conference is supported by Classrooms. And just in a nutshell, it's to internationalize teaching and learning experiences by combining cross-cultural collaborations with technology. So this is perfect. This is exactly it. We have 3 universities here today, and other people that have joined from outside. The University of Toronto, UCR, and UD Lab. That's 3 countries, and we're all brought together today by technology. So that is exactly the purpose of Global Classrooms. I've been doing this for years now, and along with Giancarlo, who's also here, and it's been a fantastic experience. And so we're just trying to build on that and make it even more, exciting. Okay, so let's just get started. So what am I talking about today? Today, just to introduce the concepts, I'd like to just go over the important role that I think artificial intelligence is going to play in global health. And so why are we considering AI for global health? Well, essentially advancing access, which is really big, to diverse regions, personalized insights and data-driven care, which is all the rage now. Digital biomarkers are currently being used in precision medicine. And then you have cross-cultural and jurisdictional AI applications. So that's something I teach in my courses. And it's really important because the delivery of medicine is different depending on the jurisdiction you are in. And so that's why these types of conferences that we have this morning are important, because we get to share the challenges and the advances that we have in our own jurisdictions to people who are in a different jurisdiction, and that's always very interesting. Um, so once again, to go a little further into what the role of AI will be in global healthcare, it's remember, artificial intelligence is a tool, so it's not magic. It's a tool that we are going to use, and we're going to use it for improving healthcare delivery. And this is where it's hopefully it will make it a little bit more equitable in terms of the delivery, whether you're in a resource rich environment or you're in an underserved area. This can overcome, so the AI will hopefully overcome distance, the lack of specialists. These are things that come up all the time, and cultural challenges. So depending on how the culture receives or would like to receive their healthcare, right? Increased accessibility and equitable healthcare is the goal of global healthcare. Now, I'll just give a very short little example of something that I've been working on for years now, and that's with Novo Nordisk, and that is working with hemophilia. And what we were looking at was how can we empower the patient, and improve access to care. So in hemophilia, the what has been observed, over the years, is that there are disparities in care. And bottom line is, it's access to care that creates this disparity. And for example, for those with hemophilia, the chances of living a normal duration of life and quality of life will be reduced by 64% in the upper middle income countries, so those that are privileged. 77% will be reduced in the middle income countries, and up to 93% will be reduced in the low income countries. So it just shows you the disparity of living with hemophilia and the impact. And so what we did is we created an algorithm, an artificial intelligent algorithm, that helps in determining whether or not you have what's called a joint bleed or a recessed distension, so fluid accumulation in your joints, which unfortunately is something that happens commonly in patients with hemophilia, and it leads to disability essentially, because the joints get damaged over time. And so they have to go into what's called a hemophilia treatment center regularly to assess whether or not the pain they have in their knee is due to a bleed and needs to be treated, or something else like, let's say, arthritis. And so with this algorithm that we've created, we can send patients home with an ultrasound device, a portable ultrasound device like Butterfly, and they will be able to assess their joints themselves at home. This empowers the patient and provides them with better access to care. And that's the purpose of our project. So, as I've already said, sorry, this is very important for empowering the patient, and this is going to lead to, or it already has, to the importance of artificial intelligence in wearable devices, right? In devices that can increase patient involvement, right, in their own care, right? Okay, so what's the future of AI in global health? No surprise. It's going to be expanding AI-based health solutions, which you're going to then tailor to the jurisdiction you're deploying in. You're going to want to use AI to bridge healthcare disparities in the low resource areas, and the use innovation in order to increase accessibility and inclusivity, which is what we're going to be looking for in the future. So here's another example of some work that we've been doing recently in Costa Rica, and this is in conjunction, of course, with my partner, Giancarlo. And that is the study. What we did here is we're introducing mHealth. So if you haven't heard of the term, that is mobile health. So it's similar to e-health, but it's specific to using a smartphone. And what we're doing is we're introducing mHealth into indigenous communities in Costa Rica. And as you can see here, I had a great time visiting these villages down in Costa Rica. And I've got to say, as a data scientist, this was like for me was a fantastic opportunity because I actually get to go out and collect data in person, which is just fantastic, right? And that's one of the other reasons that global health is so much fun, because you do need to work in the areas that you're going to deploy your AI in. So the study objectives, of course, was the preservation of their culture. So meaning we're developing an app which is going to help them document their culture, their art, their language, and they use medicinal plants, so phytotherapy, and we want to document that. And then we want to include public health initiatives, right? We're working with the Ministry of Health, and the app will address, health gaps and align with the community health needs. And we do this all while understanding their needs and, practicing what's called cultural humility versus cultural competence. So cultural competency means that you're practicing in such a way that you're satisfying what culturally the other culture does, right, and how they operate. But cultural humility, which I prefer, means that you respect how they do or how they, in this case, deliver medicine, and then you make the effort to tailor and do whatever you do in order to support what they do, which is a little different than being competent, which means that you are essentially saying that you know best and you are just doing, adapting, what you do to them. But it should be the other way around, where you should support what is done in the local culture. Anyway, that's another topic, but we can talk about that another time. So here's a picture of our app. It's a web app, which means it operates on the PC as well as on your phone. And this is just a picture of the app. So we're deploying it. We're currently in the process of testing it and getting people to use it. And I will fill you in on the success of that maybe next conference, which will be in a year from now. So all of this leads to what's called cross-cultural collaboration in AI. That's what today's theme is throughout the conference, and that is bridging diverse healthcare systems with AI. I think that's hopefully we'll talk a lot about that today. Knowledge sharing and collaboration, right, which is key, and that's why we have three distinct jurisdictions here today, right? We have Canada, Mexico, and Costa Rica. And then partnerships is where we're going to be able to work together to understand cultural and clinical variations across the healthcare regions. And as I said, really the reason we like to do this is because we can learn both ways. So it doesn't, no matter who you are, you're going to be learning, which is fantastic. All right. So I'm gonna say let's get started. So we're gonna move into our panels, the first panel today, and let me just take a few minutes here. I had this ready to go over the agenda. Well, I think there we go. So the agenda, of course, is on our website, so you're welcome to access it there. You will see here I've done my opening remarks. Thank you. We're going to move on to our first panel discussion at 11:30. We'll have our keynote by Dr. Bill Billy, who's also stepped in to be part of our first panel. Thank you very much. Because unfortunately, Jaskolka had to step away. We'll have a lunch break, which I realize will be kind of an early lunch if you're in Mexico and Costa Rica, and kind of a slightly later lunch for us. But anyway, that was the best we could do because we have 2 hours, difference between the countries. So, it's the best we could do. We'll come back for another panel discussion at 1:15, which is going to be more on startups. So we have some representatives from all three countries, which is fantastic on the startups. You're all welcome to join that. Then we follow that up with workshops. And so the workshops are concurrent. And so you will have the choice to choose between three workshops, as you can see here, and you are welcome to jump between them. So I won't lock you out. So meaning that when we create the breakout rooms, which is what we're going to do, I'm just going to create breakout rooms for the three. You can join any of them and jump between them all easy. Okay, don't feel bad. That's fine. And then finally, we'll have a little debrief. We'll talk about the workshops when we come back out. And then at 3:30, we'll have our alumni panel, and that is just to support Global Classrooms. So anybody who has taken my courses through Global Classrooms will be welcome. Actually, everybody is welcome to join, but to talk about the process of and the program for Global Classrooms, and hopefully learn from that and improve it for next year. And then we'll be closing up, and that'll be it. So everyone who does join, you are welcome. I will be issuing a little certificate saying thank you very much for joining the conference, and I'll email those out afterwards. So as long as you've registered and you attend, of course, you'll be receiving a little certificate saying that you attended the conference. Okay, let me see. I think I've covered most everything. I'll just repeat for those who have joined while I was talking that if you could please keep your cameras off and your microphones muted during the panels, unless you want to ask a question. Of course, you can lift your hand using the little put your hand up in Zoom, or you can write something in the chat, or if you really have to, which is fine too, you can just open your mic and just say, "Hey, I have a question." That's fine too. That would be appreciated throughout the conference. And I will say once again, please, if you can't stay all day because you just know it's too much, I need a break. Try not to, you know, jump off the conference right at the end for the poor workshops because it's difficult to give a workshop if there's only two people left in the conference. So if you could hang out, I'd really really appreciate it. Okay, I think that's about it. So what I'm going to do is for the first panel, I'm going to stop sharing. Here we go. We have our panelists who are showing up, which is fantastic. Okay. So just give it, we're actually ahead by a minute and a half, which is amazing. So just give me a second while I get all this set up. Okay. I think we're good. All right, so I will ask the panelists if they could turn their camera on, and they should automatically pop off. I'll ask Ravinia and Nushin to turn off your camera so you fade away. That would be appreciated. Thank you. That's fantastic, and everybody's here. So we have the pleasure of welcoming Michael Brudno, Jeff. No, not Jeff. Sorry, Jeff Jaskalka had to step away, so Alex Bilbili is filling in. April Kademi and Chris McIntosh. So the panel discussion is AI in medicine innovations and future directions. I will ask some questions, but you guys are welcome to hijack and talk about the topic on your own. Absolutely no problem. If we want some decorum, I'll probably go left to right on my screen, which is Alex, April, Chris, and Michael. That's my order that I have, and you can answer the questions in order. Everybody is present. Why don't we start with you giving a very brief, just bio, like who you are and where you're coming from, and that would be most appreciated. So we'll start with Alex because he's first on my left.
Sure. Thanks, Pascal. Thanks for organizing this conference. It's nice to meet everybody. For those that I don't know, my name is Alex Bilbili. I am a radiologist and nuclear medicine doctor at Sunnybrook Hospital, which is one of the academic centers in the Toronto area. My background is in computer science, and so I've been heavily sort of involved in machine learning since I was a medical student. And I co-founded a startup company in this space around the second year of residency. And that's sort of grown to have 2 regulatory approved AI devices on market. And that's sort of generally my background, a little bit of research, a little bit of innovation, and clinical as well.
Thank you, Alex. Well, no, none of my squares haven't changed. No. April, you're next.
Hi, Pascal. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm an associate professor of electrical, computer, and biomedical engineering at TMU, and I'm a Canada Research Chair in AI for medical imaging. The research we do in the lab focuses on the design, development, and deployment of AI tools for medical imaging, and we have particular expertise in neuroimaging and pathology imaging data. I'm excited to discuss today.
Thank you, April. We're going to move to Chris, please, sir.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm Chris McIntosh. I'm a computer scientist. I work at UHN. My academic appointments are U of T, medical biophysics, and computer science. And my area of specialty is machine learning and computer vision in healthcare. So I work on all sorts of models trying to diagnose and treat patients. Similar to Alex, we've spun some of those off and got them Health Canada, et cetera, approved and use them in patient care.
Thank you. Perfect. And last but not least, Michael Brudno.
Hi, pleasure to be here. Thank you, Pascal, for getting us all together. Michael Brudno, I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Toronto and chief data scientist at University Health Network, one of the academic health sciences centers affiliated with the University of Toronto. My research spans the applications of computational tools in medicine, including tools we've built for initially genetics, then note taking, then so natural language clinical note processing, and most recently imaging, including both things in radiology and in surgery. And in general, I work a lot on the translation of AI methodology. So not doing some novel method development, but also thinking through how does this method actually get used in the healthcare space, and thinking through the human factors and the to some extent the industrial engineering and the operations of the tool once it becomes used clinically. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Welcome everyone. Of course, we'll start with a kind of a generic question, and we'll veer into a little bit more detail as we go through it. But the question is, how has AI transformed patient care in widespread fields like radiology versus specialized fields like rare disease diagnostics? And I love this question because when you think of AI, or not you in general, a lot of people think when they think of AI, they think of diagnosing that extremely rare and difficult to diagnose, disease or illness. And whereas, and you guys have already kind of answered just by saying who your bio is, there's just so much more that AI can be applied to. So I'm going to go, unless somebody wants to jump in right away and say that's for me, I'll just go left to right again. Is that okay? And then I'll mix it up after. Okay, so Alex, you're first.
So the question is related to like the impact of AI in sort of more common diseases versus more specialized diseases. I mean, I think that AI can probably help a lot in both. But I mean, I think obviously there's significantly more data for common diseases, and also the impact is more in terms of just number of lives impacted when you design something that is for a common disease as opposed to a rare disease. That being said, it's always like a balance of like, you also don't want to marginalize people with rare diseases as they are so often marginalized. So I do believe that in today's world where there are lots of techniques now where you don't need as much data to train really good systems, I think AI is going to impact both significantly. But I do think that the low-hanging fruit, both in terms of like sort of data availability and also like just broad impact, is the more common diseases.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Chris, what do you think? Oh, no. So, anyway, that's fine. I'll get back to you, April. Don't worry about it. Chris.
I would certainly agree. I mean, I think it partially depends on how we define impact. And some of the rare diseases have better opportunity to have higher impact in terms of like mortality prevention and things that versus some of the common. So they are really important targets. But as Alex said, by definition, they're also much harder to train models on and to validate. So most AI papers don't go anywhere near reaching clinic, but if you look at the few that have reached clinic, then 100%, like they're the most common things. They're going to be, your AFibs, and there was a few other areas in cancer and some of these, but I think we'll get there as a field.
Thank you. So I'll just jump in and hopefully April and Michael can comment on this too. Is we're doing some health, so cost effectiveness, so health economics, and so that's always an interesting area because you have a scarcity of dollars in order to deliver healthcare, and so AI is actually well positioned to assist in a more efficient delivery of healthcare, which would actually target the more prevalent diseases and illnesses, because you can make a very large impact by delivering that level of care to more people in diverse jurisdictions. So I just thought I'd bring that out. I totally get what you're saying though in terms of impact per patient, right? If you have a rare disease, then it can be extremely impactful. April.
Thanks so
The
much.
floor is yours.
Yeah, so like I echo definitely what the other panelists have mentioned in terms of impact, and like rare diseases are just a little bit more difficult to work on. But I also think that a big driver of what industry works on is the return on investment. So this ties into the piece that Pascal, you brought up regarding the health economics. So which one of these algorithms can we provide a solid return on investment? So companies don't want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever it takes to develop a product without knowing how they're going to sell this tool. So there's several FDA cleared algorithms, particularly for radiology. Like there's hundreds of them. Some of the most common ones are, for example, like intracranial hemorrhage detection and triaging. So that would, this is kind of a low-hanging fruit, like one of the other panelists had mentioned, because you just are sorting images for, to find the ones that you should look at first. And so it's a little bit lower risk in terms of regulatory barriers, but it also is easy to measure that what type of performance does your radiologist get when they use this tool. So we can say that people with intracranial hemorrhage were treated 20% faster or X amount of minutes. And this directly translates into better quality of care.
Thank you. That's great. And actually, you touched on a little bit of what we'll probably talk about a little bit as well as, what are, how do you measure that, right? How do you measure success? What are the KPIs that you need to do? But that's great. Michael, all yours, sir.
The previous speakers have said all of the things I was going to say, because I really am also of the mind that one of the key metrics for which tools get implemented is KPI. It's not that rare diseases aren't worth solving, it's that it's very hard to show that a certain AI tool has made the difference. If you're able to diagnose a patient with an AI tool, well, we could have just diagnosed them possibly without the AI tool. And, the human clinicians are pretty smart. They're pretty good at doing diagnostics without AI. So where it's making an impact are the places where it saves money. And that goes back to the KPI. This is where the healthcare institution is willing to invest. So the businesses are willing to build the technology. I actually want to sort of take the thought one step further and say it's really important in the setting to align the savings and the spending. So if the hospitals are paying for the AI tools, but the savings aren't felt at the hospital, or they're not improving the bottom line of the hospital in some way, the hospital are not going to want to invest in it. It's as simple as that. So if the savings are felt by the, by the government, for example, in the case of a government-backed insurance like we have in Canada, it's really important that the innovations that the hospitals do in terms of AI feedback in some ways into the hospital budgets. It shouldn't be philanthropic.
Yeah, agreed. Alex, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think definitely we should talk about how to incentivize the right stakeholders to facilitate AI adoption, as Michael is referring to. But one thing I just thought was relevant, just before this conference started, I saw a patient with Cowden syndrome, which is a very rare genetic disease. And it's really a terrible disease. You get lesions all over the place. And it reminded me of the work that you did, Pascal, with your PhD in anomaly detection. And I thought, yes, we can train models to detect common things, but maybe there are techniques in which we can sort of adapt these models so that you can detect anomalies. And so a patient with Cowden's syndrome, who probably should have been picked up quite a long time ago because they present with unusual things early on, maybe patients like that won't get missed as much. And so you might be training something for a common disease, but how you deploy it and how you use it can actually help also rare diseases by anomaly detection. It just sort of occurred to me and I thought it was relevant.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an interesting link that you've put there for sure. Just before I get to Michael, we can segue. This would be a good one because Michael's already brought it up. In terms of, we've already talked about cost effectiveness, but we should talk about, and you've just brought up scalable solutions. And then how do you think this is going to will be useful for underserved populations, right? Because I think that's, access to care and deploying these solutions, because inevitably you guys are experts and it's fantastic, and we're lucky to have you here. However, you can't be everywhere in the world at the same time. So hopefully that's where AI will benefit us. Yeah, Michael, you have a comment.
Yeah, just Alex, to your point, I think what you're talking about is exactly right. And it just because something is rare doesn't mean that it's not financially profitable.
Mhm.
So there are companies that are working to pull rare disease patients out of the medical record in order to identify these underdiagnosed patients.
Mhm.
The one I'm most familiar with is a company in the UK called Mendelian, who are doing this on basically on NHS England data. The one thing, so the question is like, why does NHS want to do this? Why does the company Mendelian exist, who's paying for all of this? It actually becomes the rare diseases. In some cases, there are drug trials that are going to be potentially useful to the patients in that rare disease. And a lot of the time, these are drug trials for common disease drugs, which are ways for pharma companies to extend the patents on their pharmaceuticals that they're already using in common diseses, if they can show that they're also useful in the rare disease space. So at the end of the day, somebody still has to pay for it. But yes, like working on identifying underdiagnosed rare diseases is absolutely a thing, and people are doing a lot of this.
Awesome. Thank you. In terms of scalability or being able to use AI around the world, essentially is the bottom line. How would you see, not necessarily how do we do it, I get that, but it's more how would you drive AI innovation, development, research in order to support that might be the question I would ask. And we can start off with April or Chris, if either of you two, because Alex and Michael have been chatting. Does April, Chris, any comments? Would either of you like to pick up on that one?
I can start
Sure,
if that's okay.
Please, absolutely.
So some of the things is that really what the end goal of robust AI or reliable AI is that we develop a model and you can deploy it anywhere, right? So as long as that underserved region has the acquisition device, then you could deploy your tools there. Some of the considerations that you have to have is in different regions of the world, even across Canada, you might have different populations, different ethnicities, different genders, sex. So it's important that the model that you train is cognizant of these differences, and you can test them when you get to these regions. But the overarching goal of truly ethical, reliable AI, as you build a robust model, you can deploy it anywhere as long as there's an acquisition device. And I would argue that this actually increases access because, for example, we all live in Toronto. We're very lucky. We have access to specialized radiologists, specialized pathologists that, like, for example, you can have a breast pathologist. But maybe in, for example, Timmins, they have generalist pathologists. So AI really has the potential to standardize measurements so that even if you don't have access to a breast pathologist, you're going to get the same answer, even if you're a generalist pathologist or general pathologist. So, it can really increase access, I think, because it would take into account different experience levels to try and standardize the metrics.
That's okay. Yeah, Yeah, interesting for sure. Chris, before I jump in, Chris, do you have some comments you want to?
I would add that I think that, you know, we absolutely are. We're super fortunate in the major cities, not only to the access of the specialists, but to the acquisition. And that definitely is an open challenge. So, you know, there's a real penchant or risk or desire to build a model here. And even if you're using X-ray data to add whole genome sequencing and all these other things that are like, you know, super sexy and maybe increase your AUROC by 0.005, but really reduce accessibility. And then even if we focus on just X-ray, you know, we have better machines than they do in remote areas. They're serviced more often, they're configured better. And so, you know, whereas remote areas may have more equivalent to like a portable X-ray and not set up the same. And so certainly, I agree, we want AI to work in remote areas. That's absolutely a goal of it. But it's a challenge that we need to kind of overcome through external validation.
Yeah, excellent. So, when well, where I'd like to go with this is to start to troubleshoot a little bit about exactly what you've just addressed, which is some of the challenges, of course, is making some of this advanced technology, really, I'll call it advanced technology, not accessible. So it's kind of ironic that, you know, AI can definitely provide us with tools that will increase accessibility, but exactly as you've just pointed out, we may be decreasing accessibility in some ways, as you've pointed out. So if we can maybe come back to how can we, you know, I don't know if make sure is the right way, but how can we improve the ability of moving forward to make it more accessible? And what would need to be done? So I'll just from my own personal work, I've got to say I think it's a little bit ironic that the project that we're doing in Costa Rica permits us is permitted. So the problem is the problem of the, you know, the erosion of their culture is actually due to smartphones, right? So their culture, they're using more and more smartphones, and everybody has a smartphone. And unfortunately, what's happening is it's leading to the erosion of their culture. So they're not maintaining their language, and they're not maintaining phytotherapy, and they're, you know, all that you know, that they would like to maintain. They're not. But it's because of the smartphone that we're actually able to deploy mHealth, meaning that we're using, you know, the smartphone and algorithms in the smartphone. So we've built algorithms to detect and to identify plants that they use in their medicine in order to help educate their younger generations. So it is a little bit of an ironic situation that, you know, we're making use of technology that is actually part of the problem in order to improve it. So I think that's a similar example as to what you have pointed out, in that, you know, that there's some good and some bad to it. So my question to all of you is what could we do in order you know, to increase or make it more accessible, and not necessarily lose all the fun stuff, right? Which is exactly what everyone's saying. Just like Chris said, you know, you can throw in, you know, everything in there and improve your accuracy. But what do we do? So that would be my question to you.
I mean, sorry, can I just go?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Alex.
Like, I think you have to develop these things with the end goal in mind. So if your end goal is to distribute some radiology augmenting tool across North America, then you have to make sure that, you know, from the ground up, you're designing the algorithm with the highest chance of being generalizable to your intended population. If your intent is to distribute to the world, then you have to think about the data that is representative of the various areas in the world that you plan to distribute to. But in addition to sort of the performance of the algorithm and generalizability, you have to really think about like the workflow. And healthcare is like so complicated, I think, compared to other industries. And this was sort of alluded to by Michael earlier, where there are numerous stakeholders along the chain. And so often the user is not the payer, right? Which is pretty unusual. Like in our world, like in the consumer world, if you use a software product, usually you're paying for it. So the incentives are sort of like with one stakeholder, but in healthcare, it's very complicated and it varies by jurisdiction. And even like some culturally and like sort of local areas, it also varies. So I think you have to really think about your end goal, and that can help inform how you design your algorithm, what input data you use, like sort of what Chris was alluding to, like if you plan to distribute to Timmins or something, then you probably don't want to make genetic data as a mandatory input to your model, and so on. So like you got to really think about the end goal.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Does anybody else have any comments they'd like to make or add on? Anything in particular? No? Sounds good. I completely
Yes,
agree. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The only thing I would add is that the issue you brought up about, for example, cell phone use destroying the, culture. First of all, I would argue that that's happening in the Western world just as much as in the indigenous communities. But
Okay.
but going beyond the teenage brain rot and whatever else we may ascribe to the next generation, I don't think it's an AI problem, although AI may in the future exacerbate it. So it's really a problem of digital technology being broadly available where the issues I see with AI being, deployed in clinical areas, on the one hand, it's going to really improve care for a lot of individuals who don't have access today. On the other hand, it's there's going to be a little bit of the old generation complaining that the new generation doesn't have all the key core skills that are needed. Like, doctors have forgotten how to practice medicine. They can't do anything without AI, the same way that, if you read pilot forums, you'll see pilots saying, well, the new pilots don't know how to fly a plane. They just, push buttons and the plane flies itself. And if they actually need to take over and fly manually, they won't know what to do. So there's probably some truth to it, but at the same time, we can look at how aviation has gotten safer with all of these automations. Similarly, will there be some amount of, brain rot and with the, and other, negative consequences of AI deployment? Yes. The question is, like, is it going to be on average better for the humanity? And I think the answer will be also yes.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. And yeah, lovely comment on the the teenage brain rot. Does anybody else have any other comments on that topic? I'm going to move us just a little bit towards adoption. So I'd love to get your perspectives on the challenges of adopting AI in a clinical setting. If you have any insight in terms of jurisdictional differences. So it doesn't even, when I say jurisdictional, it doesn't mean different country. It could be, a different region. It could be like a rural region, or it could be like a tertiary care hospital. What, in your opinions, are the biggest barriers, and maybe even comment a little bit on which ones you think are easily surmountable or the ones that are really going to be a problem for a long time? Who would like to tackle that one first? I can just pick somebody.
I'm happy to. So we've deployed, we've sold our sort of AI medical devices to like dozens of centers, ranging from sort of academic centers to small clinics to community hospitals. And so I think there's a couple challenges, and I don't want to say that this generalizes to sort of all AI medical devices. It might be specific to our space. We sell to radiology groups and medical imaging departments. But like for us, I mean, the thing radiologists are most concerned with is workflow. Specifically for us, because our Row product, which I think I'll talk about in the next presentation, it's in the space of X-ray imaging, and the radiologist uses it to help with the X-ray interpretation. And radiologists don't spend a lot of time on X-ray interpretation. Like it's on the order of sort of like, 20 seconds to a minute type thing. So you can't add a significant amount of workflow, even if it's like a minute, because that's effectively doubling their interpretation time, and that's not acceptable. So for us, it was really important to make sure that the workflow of using our device is directly baked into the clinical workflow of the radiologist. And as radiologists ourselves, and like basically users of our own product, we sort of know how to do that in a way that is like acceptable to the rads. So that's sort of one big challenge, is make sure you can integrate properly with workflow, because nobody's going to go log into your portal online and upload it. Nobody's going to do that. And then the other challenge was, I think, what Michael brought up earlier, which is really like incentivizing the right people that are the right stakeholders, the right champions. Often, there are many of them. The bigger the institution, the more people you have to sort of speak to and get on your side. And that's a really big challenge. Even when pricing isn't really an issue, it's still a big challenge to get everybody to say, yes, this is something we want to do as an institution.
Yeah, definitely. That's that's what I hear the most, is the biggest pushback is exactly that, is integrating into the workflow for sure. Does anybody else have another comment? Chris, April, Michael, anybody?
I basically echo also what Alex has said there. I also think like a hurdle is like interoperability challenges. So, DICOM has standardized some stuff to a certain degree, but I guess this ties into Alex's point, is there's lots of different systems that have to collaborate and work together. And, accessing, using a third-party app to access sensitive patient health information is a challenge, because hospitals aren't really a big fan of doing that, like letting you have a DICOM node, for example, to test out your tool. So there's definitely the technical challenges, and exactly what Alex says, everybody has to be on board. You need to have IT, you need to have the actual imaging, then the radiologists who are going to use the tool. So it has to be a multidisciplinary, concerted effort.
Yeah, excellent. And that's where some of the challenges come up as well. So interdisciplinary is exactly as you say, and depending on where you're working, that is more or less, I don't know if feasible is the right word, but possible, I think is the word, because it gets tricky depending on where you are, right? Because you're absolutely right, it is interdisciplinary, but not every location where you are, jurisdiction, is it's not necessarily possible. So those are some of the barriers. Anybody else have any questions before we move on to another topic? No? Any comments? No, we're good. So the last topic I'd like to bring up is kind of more fun for you guys, and that is, in your opinion, what are some of the most promising innovations you see on the horizon for AI in medicine? So you can be completely outlandish, absolutely, or you can be very pragmatic and say something that you're working on. I don't mind, absolutely. And just to mix it up a little bit, Chris, can I put you on the spot and start with you?
I think that ironically, a little bit counter to what I said earlier, despite the fact that they make challenges for rural deployments, I do think that multimodal models are exciting. I mean, I think that the idea, and kind of dovetailing in with foundational models a little bit, the idea of training models with no regards to how doctors are trained. Like we don't train doctors to just read a pneumothorax. For example, we train them to read, a few different diseases, and through that they gain kind of cross understanding. So as we get closer and closer to training models the way we train doctors, I think that we'll see more intelligent models as opposed to models right now. If you look at state-of-the-art kind of single task models, I think they're a little bit more analogous to like idiot savants that can do one thing kind of reasonably well, but can't tie their own shoes. So hopefully we'll get there.
That's a nice comparison. Thank you on that one. We move. Who would like to go next? Let's just let's go to April, who is next to Chris on my screen. So what do you think?
So I'm still excited by, the availability of the tools that are now possible with deep learning. I've been working in this space since we used to use thresholding and classical image analysis, and your DSC was like 60%. So, I'm still very excited about the possibility of deep learning for especially object detection and segmentation. Those are super challenging problems. I also think that it is exactly that, to build one tool to do everything, maybe with foundation models and multimodal inputs and everything in the future, maybe we can do that. But because radiology and medicine in general is so specialized, I still of the opinion that you need specific tools for specific tasks. So there's still a lot of work to be done, even in tasks such as workflow augmentation, to add quantitative metrics to workflows. There's still a lot of things that we have to do there. So I'm pretty excited about having access to deep learning algorithms, now open sourced. Previously, you would attend MCCAI, and it was always a few years behind CVPR and NeurIPS and all those machine learning conferences. And because of availability of models and code, and this trickles down to the medical imaging space quite quickly now. Like you can see CVPR in spring, let's say, and then already the papers in fall from MCCAI are using some of those methods, whereas there used to be a huge lag. So I think things are rapidly progressing. We have access to great tools and technologies, and I'm also excited about the future. And I still think there's lots of work to be done, but I think that the future is bright.
Thank you for that, Michael. What do you think? Hopefully, you have something outlandish. Go on.
I do have something outlandish. And I think the interesting question will be whether there are certain areas of the world that are able to effectively skip the landline. So, I would say that, downtown Toronto, we have, for all the complaining we do, we have access to excellent healthcare. And there are, even in sort of, if you go further out, you still have access to very good healthcare. But there are areas of the world that really do not have access to great healthcare. And to what extent will we be able to actually move towards using ChatGPT, if you will, or the equivalents for healthcare in those areas of the world which do not have access? Obviously, the healthcare that ChatGPT or an equivalent model will provide will currently be much worse than the healthcare that can be provided by a well-qualified medical doctor, but it's better than nothing. And so it really is a trust issue. So I think that there will be certain areas of the world that will adopt AI doctors much faster than, if you will, Canada, because we have those resources here. And it will be very interesting to see if they end up with, as a result, much more accessible and on average, better healthcare than sometimes we have here, which are going to have pockets of great healthcare and pockets of less so. Is that
Interesting.
controversial enough?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I actually, I completely agree with you. Absolutely. And that's part of some of my work that I'm doing is exactly that. And yes, I agree with you, and I do look forward to it. And you kind of wonder overall, being in health economics is always a tricky question, right? Because you're trying to satisfy the population as a whole as opposed to individual care, right? Which is a little bit controversial, right? Because you always want, to care for everyone individually as well as you can. But when you crunch the numbers, you do want to overall be able to have as healthy a population as possible. So I absolutely agree with you. It'll be very interesting to see the impact of AI on the population overall in the lower income countries that are going to adopt, as you say, an AI doctor. So I absolutely
Yeah.
agree. Alex, comments.
Yeah, so I agree. I would agree with that. if the metric is simply diagnosis, but AI can't treat. And so just because you identify disease doesn't mean some sort of other jurisdiction with lower resources can actually act on that information and make a material difference in patient outcomes. So it's also very difficult to talk about medicine as a whole because this equation is very different depending on what disease you're talking about, the availability of therapies, the cost of those therapies, et cetera. But I do agree with the fact that if the standard in a specific country with low resources is here and AI can offer this, I think there's a natural inclination to facilitate that adoption, as opposed to here where everybody measures the bar by like what we have downtown. And so, but in reality, that quality of healthcare access isn't available to everybody, even in Canada. But like from a litigious perspective or from a regulatory perspective, the bar is always that bar, the high bar, right? So even though a machine learning algorithm might offer value in a place like Timmins, you can't use that as justification if that is still lower than the standard of care that you get at UHN, for example, in Canada from a regulatory perspective. So that does limit adoption here. So I definitely agree with part of what you're saying. The question was about like the high impact areas for the future of AI in medicine, right? So
Correct.
I can think of sort of two right now. One is like work I've been really involved with, which is basically opportunistic screening. So we have tons of data on people, and like I'm of the belief, and I think a lot of people would agree that that data is very underutilized. We can extract more value from that data. People get chest X-rays, they're read once by a radiologist, and then we store them forever, and nobody ever looks at them again. That is information that we can leverage on people to extract actionable clinical insights to screen for important common diseases, maybe even rare ones, that we can actually use to improve the outcomes of a population. And I think AI is perfectly suited for it because of its scale. It's a software. That's the advantage of software, is scale. So it's impossible to have a radiologist look at all these X-rays for whatever, but it's easy to have a software do that. And I think that is a very compelling argument because by screening for especially more common diseases that you have an effective, cost-effective therapy for, you set up a very strong health economic argument for why a government or an insurance company or a payer more generally should actually fund and reimburse for said tool. So I think that's really exciting. And then we can talk about multimodal stuff, but I think Chris has something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for sure. Chris, yeah, jump in, please.
I was just gonna kind of be a little controversial and just argue, I think like AI can actually provide care. It can do treatment. We use it to do radiotherapy treatments literally every day at our hospital. But I think that, there are different challenges between AI for treatment and AI for diagnostics. But I think AI for treatment is kind of, to your point, Alex, underlooked at. We kind of, for whatever reason, I think actually just because it's easier, binary classifiers are the easiest ML to build in the world. So we kind of focus on AI for diagnostics But there are really cool examples out there, and I'm obviously super biased, having built some, of using AI for care. That I think is another exciting avenue, especially in light of everything we've talked about, like with democratization and equity of health. Because it's one thing to let someone in a rural area diagnose heart failure or cancer, or the patient maybe already knows that, but it's another thing, entirely to now what do I do?
Yeah.
So I think it's an important area for us to keep pushing on.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like, and again, I think it's hard to talk about medicine in general because diseases are very different. And there are AI tools that are used to augment therapy. And there'll probably be AI tools that can sort of, steer robots to perform surgeries at some point in the future. But it's much lower than the diagnostic AI tools available today. And also the regulatory burden is much, much higher, right? Because now, especially if you're doing it in a sort of semi-autonomous fashion to sort of get the scale that we're talking about, you're now impacting like people directly. And I think that's going to be a big sort of burden to get over, but maybe it'll be easier for countries that don't have a better alternative. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry,
agreed.
I apologize, Pascal. My laptop, the charger does
Yeah.
not work. So I'm gonna have to hop onto my desktop, but
Sure,
there's
sure.
no camera. So I'll
Do
be
that because you're up next. So
Yeah.
please do that. Yeah. Drop off and reconnect for sure.
I'll be
No
right back.
problem, Alex. So actually, while Alex is doing that, if anybody has any questions for our panel, please feel free to put your hand up or just blurt out the question now, or you can write it in the chat and we will get, we'll have it addressed by the panel through the chat. Please feel free to do that. If not, we're going to move on to Alex's keynote address. But for the panelists, thank you so much for joining. That's been fantastic. Just to remind you all that this conference is being recorded. And so it will be made available to people. And it's funny, I've been fielding emails as we're going through this, and people have been asking for the ability to view it later, so that it will be. So that's fantastic. And thank you. So thank you again to the panelists. We can't really have a big clap on virtual. It's a little bit different, right? In virtual, but thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pascal.
And hopefully we'll have you at another conference in the future. So thanks again. So we are going to move on to Alex's keynote, and then we do lunch after that. We'll have a bit of a break. But if you want to, do a 30-second or 1 minute walk around, you can certainly do that because Alex is just connecting, and we'll get him going. And I think Alex is connected. Wow, that was quick, Alex.
I had it already. I saw my battery dwindle.
That's awesome.
I got to prepare.
Okay, well, Alex, no, there's no questions in the chat, so that's fantastic. Take it away, sir. It's all the floor is yours.
Okay. You can hear me and see my screen okay?
Absolutely perfectly.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for a great panel. That was pretty fun. My talk is about the sort of opportunistic screening that was alluded to during the panel discussion. So will AI shift the paradigm of osteoporosis screening? That's what we're going to discuss today. These are my disclosures. So I mentioned that I co-founded a company as a resident. It's called 16-Bit. We do manufacture an osteoporosis opportunistic screening software, which we'll also talk about because that's the only regulatory approved device in the world, to our knowledge. And we have real world data that I'd like to share. And I also have some grants from Amgen, which is a manufacturer of osteoporosis medication. The objectives of today is really talk about the current status of osteoporosis screening and what new opportunities are available with AI. And I'm going to spend some time sort of grounding everybody so that we have an understanding of what the clinical problem is today, so that we can understand the potential value of machine learning. And then we'll talk about some real world impact that we're seeing with our device, which has been on the Canadian market for over 2 years now. So what is the problem? Osteoporosis is a disease that causes weakening of the bones, both in terms of decreasing bone density, but also bone quality. And this progression of degradation of the bone is silent. The patients don't have any symptoms with this progression. It's probably happening to all of us right now, and you don't really feel it. So why do we care about it? The reason we care is because this weakening leads to what we call fragility fractures. These are fractures that occur in bone that is unusually weak, and in a situation where a fracture wouldn't normally occur, like a fall from standing height. And there is a distribution of these so-called fragility fractures across various sites. And so it's hard, like each one has a bit of a different profile in terms of morbidity and mortality. But in general, just to sort of prove to you that this is an important event that we want to prevent, the absolute mortality risk within 1 year of suffering a fragility fracture ranges from about 9% to over 32%, depending on whether it was a hip or non-hip site of injury and whether you're a man or a woman. So if you're a man with a fragility hip fracture, your chance of dying in the next year is increased by 32%. So that is really the clinical side. That's why I want to prevent it from the patient's perspective. But what about the health economic side? Something we sort of discussed briefly during the panel. This is an extremely prevalent problem. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men at some point in their life will suffer a fragility fracture. In Canada, what this means is that we have over 200,000 fragility fractures a year, and we actually spend $4.6 billion just to manage these acute fractures. This doesn't even account for the long-term costs in terms of loss of economic productivity and long-term care costs that many of these people have to go through. And this is not a local Canadian problem. This is a global problem. And you can see that the ratios are relatively similar. So globally, as a human race, we spend $400 billion a year to treat these fractures, many of which are preventable if treated. And that's really the good news, is that we have cost-effective therapy. So I just use osteoporosis therapy is a big topic, but the prototypical therapy is a bisphosphonate. So this bisphosphonate alendronate costs $130 per patient per year in Canada. And that results in a relative risk reduction ranging from 60% to 80%, depending on which site of fragility fracture we're talking about. So relatively quite cost-effective therapy is available. The bad news is that we don't know who to treat. And this is because our current screening system is ineffective. So this data is like notoriously difficult to find, but I have some data here from Ontario, like the province that we're in Canada, from 2014, 2015, looking at people aged 68 to 70 who meet criteria for bone mineral density screening with DEXA. And even though these people are the highest risk people, not the highest risk, but are at risk enough to warrant the government paying for their screening, meaning they meet the criteria, only 21% of them are screened, while almost 80% of them are not screened. And this makes sense because over 70% of people that present to the emergency room with a fragility fracture have never been assessed or screened for osteoporosis. And this is probably due to the fact that this disease progression is silent. And so it's not top of mind for the patient. It's not top of mind for the family doctor because our family doctor colleagues are super busy and inundated with lots of things. And so tackling this chronic asymptomatic disease is not a priority. So basically what we have is we have a situation where there's an asymptomatic, highly prevalent disease that leads to fragility fracture. These fractures have a high clinical and economic burden. There's cost-effective therapy available, but our screening system is ineffective at identifying who would benefit from therapy. So can AI add value in this context? And I think I'm going to say that the answer is a resounding yes. There are many ways in which AI can add value in the space of osteoporosis. The way I'm going to specifically talk about today, and I think one of the biggest impact ways, is by leveraging existing data to opportunistically identify patients that are at risk for this disease. And this is being done on CT, on X-ray, and there's sort of relatively new literature that says maybe we can do this to a sufficient degree by using non-imaging data, things like lab values and other clinical variables. It's relatively new, and frankly, I don't know that much about it, and there aren't any regulatory approved devices on the market in this space, so I won't talk about it further. in terms of CT, this slide has a lot of text, but the core message here is that in a CT scan, there's enough information present that you can actually measure the bone mineral density directly from these CT scans that are being acquired for other reasons. Think somebody has abdominal pain and they want to rule out appendicitis, so they get a CT of the abdomen and pelvis. So the advantage, really, the core advantage is that the accuracy and precision can match DEXA. DEXA is what is the current gold standard for measuring bone density, and it's the current gold standard for making the diagnosis of osteoporosis. The other advantage is that you can concurrently assess for compression fractures. The reason that's important is because the presence of compression fracture makes a patient automatically at higher risk, and those patients are typically treated with bisphosphonates or other pharmacological intervention. And this some software that does this is available commercially in the US, but there is very minimal adoption. And part of the reason I believe that there is very minimal adoption is that you still need, it goes back to the workflow discussion we had during the panel. You still need a manual intervention by the radiologist or the technologist or somebody that's trained medically to actually segment out these vertebral bodies here in order to get the right region of interest to get this in the bone density information. And that's just too much impact on the clinical workflow. And that's why basically nobody uses this technology. The other sort of potential disadvantage is the impact of IV contrast. So as some of you may know, when we acquire CT scans, sometimes we inject a dye into the patient. And that dye, depending on the amount of dye and when we inject relative to when we scan, it can actually impact what the images look like and can impact the measurement of bone density using these softwares. Another disadvantage is that if the lumbar spine and the hip isn't included in the field of view, so imagine somebody is getting a chest CT to assess for pulmonary embolism, for example, you cannot use that to make the diagnosis of osteoporosis necessarily, because traditionally the diagnosis is made from the lumbar spine and hip. And so that can be a big disadvantage. And then the final disadvantage regarding to just as a population screening tool is that CT is not the most common imaging modality, which leads me to X-ray, which is the most common imaging modality and performed an order of magnitude more than CT. And it's also performed in numerous low financial resource settings, other countries that don't have the same healthcare systems that we do here in Canada. The challenge, the main disadvantage with X-ray imaging is that there is not enough information, I believe, to match the precision and accuracy of a DEXA scan when it comes to measuring bone mineral density. However, there is enough information to classify whether a patient is likely to have normal bone density or abnormally low bone density from X-ray imaging. And I already mentioned we're leveraging the most common imaging modality, which is a huge advantage. The other thing is that, so I'm going to talk about our product, which is called Row. And the reason I'm going to talk about it is because there are 3 other companies that we know of that are working on a similar product, but we don't have any insights into how their product works or its advantages or disadvantages because they're not commercially available yet. So the only commercially available tool is Row. And so I will talk, like, that's where I'm drawing these advantages and disadvantages from. So our tool can actually use a chest X-ray, which, as you know, doesn't include the lumbar spine or hip, to actually predict what the bone density would be at those areas in order to basically determine whether somebody's likely to have a low bone density or not. Similarly, as radiologists designing this tool, we sort of automated the entire process such that no manual intervention is required, and it's fully integrated into the clinical workflow of the RAD. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why we've seen adoption in Canada. The other sort of advantage is that we can adjust the threshold in order to meet a specific clinical practices sort of preference on where they want to operate on the AUC curve, whether they want to be very sensitive or they prefer specificity over sensitivity because they may not have the DEXA availability to basically follow up with these people and better assess them with DEXA. So I've mentioned this thing called Row. So what is it? Its intended use is to analyze frontal radiographs performed for any clinical indication in patients aged 50 and older, And this generates a risk score. This risk score is shown on the graph here on the x-axis. We call it the Rowe score. And this risk score correlates to the chance that the patient has low bone density if they were to get a subsequent gold standard DEXA. And you can see there's a very strong correlation between a higher risk score, i.e. 6 and up, and your chance of having low bone density if you were to get a DEXA. Importantly, Rowe can use any of these 6 body parts. You'll notice chest is there and knee are there. This is about 80% of all x-rays performed in this 50 plus age group. Rowe was awarded FDA breakthrough status in March 2021. It's patented in multiple jurisdictions. It's been on the Canadian market for over 2 years, and recently we got FDA de novo approval in April 2024. So this is our seminal publication published in October 2023 in the JACR, where we evaluated Rowe on these 3 data sets here. These are very different data sets spanning Canada, the US, as well as older data sets. This KMOS data set is from a 17-year longitudinal study conducted a decade ago. And you can see that the AUCs are relatively close, all above 0.8 in the 0.8 to 0.9 range, considered very good for a medical imaging test. And then for the FDA wanted us, and going back to a lot of the stuff we talked about in the panel, they wanted us to evaluate our product on different ethnic groups to ensure it's equitable. And so this OMN data set included equal ethnic representation from the 4 major ethnic groups in the States. So Hispanics, Caucasians, Blacks, and Asians. And we found no significant interaction with ethnicity, and Rowe performed quite well in that data set. So how is the tool used in practice? We talked a lot about the importance of workflow. So what we do is when a customer wants to purchase our product, we ask them to provision a machine for us. It's usually a very simple machine with very minimal specifications. They give us access to that machine, usually through a vendor VPN. We log in, install the software, and we configure the software to interface with the institution's PACS system. The software will then automatically ping the PACS system every sort of adjustable time interval. The default is 1 minute, and it will automatically detect when any eligible X-ray has been performed. It will download it, it will analyze it, it will generate a Rowe report, which you can see here. And this Rowe report gets sent directly to the X-ray session file on the PACS system. So when the radiologist goes to read the X-ray, they're going to see the chest X-ray as they would normally, and then they'll also see the Rowe report as a separate series with one instance directly in their workflow. And this all happens within about 2 to 3 minutes. So it's always available for the radiologist to review. And as a quality of life feature, we only send Rowe reports that meet a certain threshold of Rowe score. The default is 6 and up. That's what most of our customers use to consider something Rowe positive. And if something is Rowe positive, they insert a macro text into their clinical report, which goes back to the referring clinician that basically says, this patient's been flagged to be at risk for low bone mineral density, recommend a clinical fracture risk assessment, and DEXA if appropriate. I'll skip through this. Basically, Health Canada, we got July 2022. FDA, we got April 2024. And we have applications submitted for both Australia and Europe, which we expect by the end of 2025. So what have we done in the past 2 years in Canada? We've been very lucky to basically clinically screen almost 250,000 Canadians, 2/3 in Ontario, 1/3 in Alberta. We're installed at numerous sites. And we screen, actually this number's a little outdated, we probably screen about 1,200 patients a day for disease with Rowe at our clinical partners. This is some data I've been sort of allowed to share by some of our customers. True North Imaging is a clinic that has numerous, I think 16 sites across the sort of GTA area. And basically we looked at, they're one of our oldest customers. So we looked at patients that received a Rowe positive report from September to January, back at September 2022 to January 2023. That was 2,400 patients. About 10% of them came back for a DEXA scan. And really the core clinical question is, are we recommending Rowe positive? Are we saying, is the recommendation of Rowe positive meaningful? i.e., do these people actually have disease? Of the 10% that came back for DEXA, 93% of them had low BMD, 75% had osteoporosis, and perhaps most importantly, almost half of them were deemed to be at moderate or high fracture risk. For those that don't know, fracture risk is really the main way that we determine whether somebody gets therapy or not. So these are 50% of these people like were totally missed and will benefit from therapy. And then from an operations business side, this results in an overall 70% increase in DEXA referrals to TNI, which is basically the argument that we make to these customers to purchase Ro, because they get a financial ROI in addition to the clinical ROI to the patient. Sorry, Pascal, am I at 12:30 or 12:45?
Sorry, Alex. You're until 12:45, but you may want to leave a few minutes for questions.
Okay, all right. I will speed through the rest. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
So this is, excuse me, this is data we collected through a prospective study done at my hospital, where we prospectively recruited 1,142 patients, and we Ro analyzed 985 of them. 650 were positive, 131 came back for DEXA, and very similar, sort of like relatively high rate of low bone mineral density and almost equal rate of increased fracture risk. We also took the opportunity to ask these patients, how did they feel by the fact that their X-ray was screened by an AI system in the background? And you can see the majority of people sort of scored three and up in terms of their satisfaction. That's something that an AI system was screening their X-ray in the background. And something we wanted to know, because, you know, in today's world, like there is rightfully so some sort of concern around technology being too invasive and sort of too opportunistic in a way. But we wanted to sort of get that signal from patients. We also took the opportunity to ask family physicians how they felt that we were offering this information on X-rays that they ordered for other reasons. And to our pleasant surprise, 75% of them actually said that they found Ro's information useful in managing their patients directly. In terms of future sort of directions for us, where this health economic analysis, again, brought up in the panel discussion as well, is very critical for us, because if our argument is that if we believe our software is identifying the right people that would benefit from therapy, then we should be able to make an argument that says deployment of our software will save money in the long term by preventing fragility fracture. So we've already have the first draft of this economic analysis completed, where we basically look at the rate of Ro positives, how many of those go on for DEXA, how many are likely to be at increased fracture risk, how many are likely to get therapy, the number needed to treat for therapy, the cost of therapy, the cost of follow-up. You account for all those things. And in the end, for a province like Ontario, we can show that using Ro broadly will likely save Ontario somewhere between $10 and $14 million a year, while also improving the care of patients. And I think that's really the promise of AI. And it makes sense. The promise of software is to make things more scalable, more cost-effective. And I think this is a great example of something that can do that. The other sort of future direction is I mentioned that fracture risk is really what drives management of patients. So can we somehow engineer Ro to provide information that is more closely related to the fracture risk? So we ran this study with Amgen, where we looked at in terms of using FRAX, which is the most commonly used fracture risk model that drives therapy. You can use FRAX without any bone mineral density information. You can use FRAX with DEXA and bone density information. But we also want to see, what if we use FRAX with Ro-derived bone density information? And you can see that the C-index significantly improves compared to using FRAX without BMD information. And it's not as good as FRAX with DEXA, which is to be expected. But the fact that we can get very close, like most of the way there, is a lot of value, especially for a low resource setting, or even a non-low resource setting like the UK, where they do actually very little DEXA. They rely a lot on FRAX no BMD. So we can go there and say, hey, look, we can offer you better performance without actually getting a DEXA by leveraging X-rays that already exist. And then the other sort of area that we're exploring is actually the area of pre-surgical bone health optimization for patients undergoing a joint replacement surgery, both spine as well as like knee and hip. And the reason that's important, it's sort of like a growing body of literature that shows that orthopedic surgeons actually don't really consider people's bone health when they go for surgery. They sort of just adjust for it as needed intraoperatively, which is kind of crazy. And so if you're going to get a rod inserted in your femur, you probably want to know like what kind of bone that rod is being inserted to. And so orthopedic surgeons in the States are actually super interested in Roe, even more so than the radiologists, because they see it as a way to improve their post-surgical outcomes and the outcomes of their patients. So that's a really exciting area for us. And with that, I will end, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Alex. Great presentation as usual, and as you know, I love your work. I'll just make one small comment on your work, and it's I was a part of a startup called ASAGE that was for a medical medication delivery device. And it's interesting, back in the day, we exited the company, by the way, so there's no conflict of interest here or anything. But I used to pitch that one of the biggest challenges in healthcare is actually falls and fall prevention, and it costs the Canadian, healthcare system a little over 10 billion a year, which is just a huge amount of money, right? And one of the causes is polypharmacy, or like just aging seniors being on so many medications, and if they don't take them appropriately, they can get dizzy or unstable, and they fall and they break their hip, right? And so I was just thinking, how interesting, like in terms of your, based on your presentation, you're assessing risk, right, for fracture, and it's just interesting how this can come together in terms of kind of a whole package, as opposed to just risk. Or you could also look at once you identify risk, then there could be an educational component, right? Going to these patients to say, hey, you not only are you at risk, for a fracture, but if you are on many medications, you should be mindful of that, and to avoid falls. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that in because it's just interesting. Obviously I've been following your work for a long time.
Actually, it's super timely that you bring that up. So we do have a patient-facing version of Roe. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if we ever mentioned that to you.
No.
Yeah, so it's regulatory approved in Canada, and we actually offer it on Pocket Health. So people, people that
amazing.
have X-rays, that upload
Yes,
X-rays that
yes.
are Roe eligible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they only offer it to their highest subscribers. They're trying to
Okay.
push
Yeah.
people to the higher subscription. But basically, you can get a Roe analysis, and then instead of the report that you get here, which is I see somebody has figured out that this is a public link, and
Yeah.
it's very smart of you. So instead of getting this radiology facing report, you get a patient facing report. And that report shows you the Roe score, but also gives you like 6 pages of like, what is low bone density? What does fracture risk mean? What can you do about it? And this is all
Amazing.
information recycled from Osteoporosis Canada, which puts out patient facing
Yeah.
information. And so, yes, I totally agree. I think like this provides an opportunity to also put the patient more in charge of their health. And I think that's a trend we're seeing for sure, regardless of AI. So it works well.
Huh. Very interesting. Pocket Health. Yeah, I have it.
Yeah.
I use
Yeah.
Pocket Health. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to open it up to any other questions from the audience. If anybody like to ask questions, you're welcome to ask in Spanish. You're welcome to put it in the chat in Spanish. You're welcome to put it in English in the chat, or put your hand up, or blurt it out. Does anybody have any questions for Alex from his presentation? Or in general, actually, just Alex in general. Anybody? Okay, so we have one question. Afsane, of course, please ask your question.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Alex. That was very interesting talk. My question is, you mentioned that about 30% of patients were not satisfied with Roe. Do you know the reasons for not being satisfied? And the other question I have is, how many centers in Toronto are using a role so far? Mhm.
So you're talking about these 15% of patients, 13% said 1, i.e. not satisfied, and 2 said sort of 2 on that scale. We didn't ask why. There was no like free text for like justifying your answer. So I don't know why they were not satisfied. In terms of your second question, how many centers in Toronto are using it? I'd have to think about that a bit more, but there's at least 6. And then there's like UHN is using it as part of a research study right now. And there's at least another sort of 4 centers that are undergoing the procurement phase. Yeah.
And thank you so much. And may I ask how fast the report will be available?
Usually 3 minutes. It can
Wow.
vary a little bit, but it's on the order of sort of, it depends on like when it pinged the PACS relative to when the X-ray was completed, but it's on the order of sort of like 2 to 4 minutes, I would say.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for Alex and his presentation? Please, as I said, put it in the chat, or you can just put your hand up, or you know what, actually, if you put it in the chat, we can also get redirect the questions to panelists or to presenters afterwards, because this session, this conference is being recorded, and it's funny, I'm getting constantly pinged here with questions, you know, can we see the recording? Which is the advantage of a virtual presentation, and that's the intent, is that you can view it when it's convenient for you, and you don't necessarily have to sit through the whole thing in one go. So does anybody, if there's no other questions, I can't see anything clearly yet in chat, or nobody's put their hand up. We're absolutely on time, which is fantastic. So I'll take this opportunity to thank Alex for not only being a panelist, but also for presenting today our keynote lecture. Thank you very much, Alex. Always a pleasure hearing you and getting the updates on Roe. That's fantastic. And on that note, I will say, please go have lunch or take a break or walk around or do your 7th inning stretch, as we say here in the baseball, fans. And we will come back at 1:15. So we have exactly 45 minutes to go and relax. And we'll come back for a panel at 1:15. If you could please log on a little bit early, that would be appreciated, so we can stay on time. So log on at least 5 minutes early. And I'm going to ask again, please log on. So just, go have a break, relax, and then come back and log on, because I know as the day progresses, people have things to do, and they kind of I'm not going to log back on, but it's really rough on the presenters in the afternoon, right, to see that the audience is dwindling. So if you could please make an effort to log on, or ask your buddies to log on, I would very much appreciate it. So once again, thank you very much, Alex, for joining. I will see you all after lunch in about 45 minutes. And if you could please log on early, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, I am starting the recording again. So here we go. And I'm going to start by asking the panel to introduce themselves. So for those of you in the audience, if you could turn off your video and mute yourselves, that would be most appreciated. Any comments and questions are welcome anytime in the chat in any language, well, preferably in Spanish or English, and we can answer during the panel. So why don't we just start off with our panelists? You can introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing in the space. And then we'll get started on the question. So I'm going to go from left to right for my panelists that are on currently. So Joe, you're starting, please.
Great. Thank you, Pascal. Thank you all for having me today. I am post night shift, so if I'm not coherent, please, my many apologies. I'm Joe Choi. I'm a practicing emergency physician at the University Health Network. I'm also the Director of Clinical Analytics and Business Intelligence in my emergency department as well. I'm a clinician in quality improvement and innovation at the University of Toronto, hold a rank of assistant professor. And I'm here mostly to talk about my entrepreneurial role as the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Operating Officer at Hypercare. Again, pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. Gabriel, you are next.
Hi, everyone. Well, my name is Gabriel Solana. I am from Mexico, and I currently work in an imaging company that does enhancement of MRI and X-rays and all these images. But as previously Joe mentioned, I'm going to talk here about some startup that I founded some years ago, and well, share with you my experience.
Perfect. Thank you. Valentin, last but not least. You're muted, sir.
Good morning. My name is Valentin Sagades. I'm the CEO of Quality XP Development. We're a software engineering group based out of Heredia in Costa Rica. We do a lot of work around the areas of IoT intermixed with machine learning and some other interesting stuff in the field of AI. But very glad to be here with the group and be able to contribute.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So Ben Fine was supposed to join the panel, but he's that's actually one of the reasons I was waiting a little bit. And I don't believe, unless I'm wrong, Ben, I don't believe he's been able to join. I think something's come up. So anyway, so we'll just move forward. So thank you all for joining. This is kind of a neat panel. I think it's cool, inevitably. And what we're talking about is startups in different jurisdictions. So all three of you have had experience with startups, and all three of you are from completely different jurisdictions. And so that is the intent today, is to talk about that. Not all of you are necessarily have direct experience in healthcare, and that's okay. I think really what we want to talk about is how challenging was it to actually be successful in a startup, or not. If you want to share, I'll be completely transparent. I've been part of many startups, and sadly not all of them are successful. You're welcome to share that as well. But to get things started, we're going to just talk about the current landscape in medical startups. And I would just like to ask your opinion as to how you see or how you've seen the startup landscape evolve over the recent years. And no surprise, I would say in the last few years, so COVID, which was a big one on impact on startups, as well as AI. AI has been around forever, as you guys know, and I won't go into that lecture. But certainly in the last few years, thanks to generative AI and LLMs, it's been very impactful for small businesses. So I'd like to hear your opinion on that. I'm going to start just to make it easy, left to right. So Joe, you're first, please.
Sure, thanks. And when I saw this question, the first thing that came to mind was AI. I kind of wrote AI down 3 times. Speaking as a startup, entrepreneur, I think, taking it back in terms of what gets the most eyeballs, what gets the most funding, what gets the most attention, it's definitely AI. And it kind of reminds me of when blockchain was all the rage. So, anytime you mention an idea, you somehow incorporate blockchain, even if it doesn't make sense, you're going to get a lot more funding than if you didn't mention that word. So I think AI is, obviously AI, in my opinion, is a lot more exciting, a lot more valuable in the healthcare space than blockchain. So it's not just a matter of, throw this flashy toy on, but it is, a huge emphasis in the world of venture capital and funding, and, whether it's governmental funding or anything else. Specifically in my space, with my startup, it's very much a business application. So we essentially are trying to consolidate and better manage on-call schedules and have better communication within the hospital and within the community as well. So, as you can imagine, a scheduling, messaging, kind of HR management software tool has a lot of competitors in the space. I feel that we do things slightly differently, but one of the big things that we're seeing, maybe even the AI space as well, is a lot of consolidation. Probably has been going on for every industry for all of eternity. But even most recently, especially as after COVID, the economy was a little bit tougher, the fundraising was a little bit tougher. You had a lot of companies that were just kind of getting bought up, and so it definitely makes my life a bit more interesting in terms of thinking about the business aspect of it, how to best position ourselves when, you know, we have startups that are being bought up by multi-billion-dollar companies and trying to position ourselves. So those would be, you know, the big trends that I see. One last point is, you know, specifically with what I do, is the change in the risk tolerance for privacy and security things. So, you know, our company deals with a lot of patient data, and you know, particularly in Canada, I think the US has always been a little bit further ahead with these aspects with HIPAA and the huge fines that they have to pay. But in Canada, I think now that we're finally digitizing, you know, speaking for myself at UHN, we were using paper charts up until 2022. And so digital and cybersecurity really has come to the forefront. And in many ways, because several of the hospitals in Toronto have been burnt, you know, Sick Kids, Michael Garron, they all had their code grays and their cyber attacks. You know, more emphasis is on clamping down those potential security risks, and it could actually be a dampener for startups that want to break in, because you know the threshold to entry, most of the time rightfully so, is that much higher. So they want to make sure that you have all your credentials and all your security things lined up, which again adds a lot more burden to startups getting all these certifications, and also slows down deals because you have a lot more red tape, a lot more bureaucracy to go through. So you know that's what I've been seeing.
Thanks. And so being mindful of your time, because I know you have to jump off, I'm going to ask this question now right away, because I just think it's very pertinent, especially for what you do. So as you know, WhatsApp is a very popular, you know, app tool that is used, I think, everywhere around the world, right? And it's the same in Central America and Costa Rica and in Mexico. That WhatsApp is used as an easy way of communication, and it is absolutely used clinically. So meaning it's used in the hospitals. And so I know your story of hypercare, and you know I've been following it along, and I've had these discussions before. And so what advice, or not advice, but your comment on, because we're kind of jumping to the next question, but the next question is going to be, you know, how does emerging technologies, you know, play and accelerate innovation, right? And so it's interesting that WhatsApp is actually driving some, you know, usefulness. The only problem is, as I'm sure you will state, is that, you know, privacy and security and all that is not met through WhatsApp. But it is being used, right? It's being used all the time. Even I'm going to say, even here, it's being used, and it shouldn't be. So what's your opinion there? Like, obviously you are a solution to that here, but if you wanted to enter, and maybe you have, I don't know, if you wanted to enter Mexico or Costa Rica, like what would your approach be? Just, you know, because regulatory is different there, you know, drivers are different. And so anyway, I just thought I'd ask you that question. And then of course, Gabrielle and Valentine, you're welcome to jump in terms of your perception as well.
Yeah, so just very briefly, I think in medicine, speak as a clinician, you know, kind of like, you know, boots on the ground and seeing patients. We use whatever's available to get the job done. And sometimes we kind of bend the rules a little bit, you know, but sometimes so, you know, I am absolutely guilty in using WhatsApp and iMessage in the past for patient care when I shouldn't. Now we try to take safeguards, you know, trying to maintain, okay, what does the regulatory body require of us? What will get us in serious trouble? And trying to, you know, skirt those lines. So for instance, you know, we all play the game of, yes, you can't mention a patient's name, you can't mention their demographics. So we kind of make up little stories, right? We use their initials, we kind of use vague descriptions. But whenever you kind of go down that path, you know, mistakes can be made, right? But at the end of the day, it's all about patient care. And based on what I do, you know, we absolutely steal ideas from, you know, other sectors that have figured this out and maybe have less of a regulatory burden. So, you know, the whole reason we started a company is like, why can't I use WhatsApp? You know, my initial approach to this company is like, why don't I just make a hospital policy use WhatsApp? And then as I got deeper, more knowledgeable about the regulations, that's when it came up. Now, talking about different markets, I think you hit it on the head, essentially saying you have to understand what the market wants, what those regulatory requirements are, and what are the consequences of them not getting that solution. You know, so with HIPAA and HITRUST in the States, you know, those fines are sky high, multi-million-dollar fines. You know, and their reputation also matters a lot more in some ways in the States compared to Canada, because they're all private enterprises. So they are definitely ahead of the game in terms of adopting something like us to keep, obviously not running afoul of the law, but also to, you know, to avoid those heavy fines. So if I were to go into other markets, so, you know, we're trying to make inroads in the UK and the EU right now, it's just understand what those regulations require, what the medical legal situation has been to kind of gauge what their appetite would be. Because a lot of places, for instance, we went to Barcelona and a lot of people was like, yeah, we use WhatsApp, we'll get in trouble, but it's not that big of a deal. And so, then you kind of recalibrate and say, okay, like, is this worthwhile to spending your business development resources and you're going to a market where there doesn't seem to be a perceived problem? So I would say, like, number one, understanding the regulation, and number two is understanding just what the value proposition is in light of those regulations and what happens if you were to not follow them.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So just to get some other opinions. So Gabrielle, I'm just going from left to right. So Gabrielle, please, give us, a little bit about where we're at and where we're going, and then please jump in about, the different products in different jurisdictions with different regulatory requirements.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first, what I want to say is that I founded that startup in 2014. So the landscape has changed like considerably from then to now. One of those things is, for example, I was focusing on hardware, and right now I think software is way easier to like jump into and to start to commercialize. It's cheaper to do because software, hardware, it was like really expensive for us to get the machines and the time, etc. So that is one of the things. Also, the interest has been shifting. When I was working on the products, etc., there was like a lot of interest and support in some topics. But right now, if you mention AI as a like, it's going to be a hot topic, and everyone is going to be interested in your product, even if you don't necessarily use the AI as such. So that is also interesting, but that also derives into the economic support. For example, when I was working on the startup, we applied for economic support from the government because we didn't want to get economic support from private investors. They try to control like the whole company and the whole idea. So at that time, we didn't get like this money, but I believe that also it has been shifting, at least here in Mexico. That is something that might be different in Canada or in other countries. In Mexico, the support from the government has been like decreasing. Right now, you have to try to fund yourself from crowdfunding, for example, in the internet, or go to a private investor. That's like the main route right now. And well, also a global market. My application was not exactly needed for regulatory like really FDA or something like that, because it was not related to medicine. But still, you have to see what is the place where you are going to commercialize this. In our case, it was pretty easy to do. But since we were like only focusing on Mexico, we do not have much experience on that. I cannot comment like in other jurisdictions what was like the requirements.
So we'll let Valentin talk, but it would be nice if you thought a little, if all three of you thought a little bit about, challenges specific to your jurisdiction, and share that, because I think you're absolutely right. Gabriel, if you've only operated in Mexico, you're only going to know the scene in Mexico, but that's okay. That's the whole point. That's why the three of you are here, is to share that. So think about that. So Valentin, I'll let you give an answer, and then we can talk a little bit about those jurisdictional differences.
Sure thing. So jurisdiction as far as Costa Rica is concerned, that's always a fun aspect of I guess the journey with any type of medical startup here in Costa Rica. In general, I guess the differences that I've seen working with, for example, North American groups, mainly in Canada and the US, versus our jurisdiction has had to be with regulations. Regulations meaning, for example, there's this overhanging concern with regards to getting hit with HIPAA or HITECH up in North America versus our jurisdiction, which is how do we try to commercialize something, basically, and working with government-based institutions. Since our socialized medicine system is very kind of like ingrained into our culture, it's you first have to look at the aspects of any type of startup process has to start looking at how do we work potentially with smaller private medicine groups, or land in, for example, a hospital, one of the larger private hospitals, and then make their way possibly into a process with our social medical system. So, yep, I think the big aspect or big differences that I've seen with one and the other has been around this, and plus, in order for a physician to be able to use any type of advancement in tech here in Costa Rica, is for example, something like COVID brought around the possibility of doing telemedicine, which was like for at least for our latitude, that was like one of the bigger advancements as far as allowing a physician to be able to remotely provide any sort of care. But if you look at the legislation, they put a very small but into the law that says the physician has to do a first physical visit. So there's a lot of, I guess, taboos and misconceptions that we still have to work around with regards to those type of things. Kind of allow I guess, the whole authentication, verification process to happen a little bit more in the digital realm versus worrying about somebody trying to impersonate somebody else, for example. But I guess my 2 cents, yeah, we need to, I guess, liberalize our legislation a little bit more in order to allow innovation to be able to flourish a little bit easier. Give us less of a heartache trying to innovate. That's it.
Okay, great comments from everyone. And so I think what I'm hearing, which is no surprise, is that you need to know the lay of the land, right? You need to know how it works in your jurisdiction and what is going to be a barrier and what's going to be a facilitator for your startup. So the question back to all three of you is going to be, how do I discover that? So if I'm a new entrepreneur, and I'm in ideation, let's say. So let's say we go from ideation to development to, validation to scaling. Let's just say, right? Where do you look? Like, I know here in Canada, and Joe can comment on this, we have many, incubators, we have many accelerators, we have RICs, regional innovation centers. We have a lot of resources that we can plug into in order to get some help and some understanding of what needs to be done. I suspect, and I'm pretty sure, it's very similar in Mexico and in Costa Rica. But the bottom line is, how do you think it works best? Like, what's your opinion as to the best suggestions you can give to people in the audience that may be thinking of starting something up, that for them to navigate this process of plugging in, I guess. So let me just start back with Joe, and then we'll go through again.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that really benefited us in the beginning was, we were part of the UTest environment, so the University of Toronto incubator. And that connected us, specifically with healthcare, and given how big healthcare is in Toronto specifically, gave us a lot of those initial connections, especially on the regulatory side. So again, speaking as a clinician, I feel that I have a good grasp of that subject matter expertise. However, when it comes to regulation and like passing regulation, getting certified for regulation, I think that's where UTest and their network has been really helpful. And just talking to other entrepreneurs. So, this network kind of expands outward. So it's just a lot of firing, midnight WhatsApp messages to your fellow CEOs and COOs and say, hey, like, does this make sense? We were fortunate early on to be introduced to a company that specializes in healthcare privacy and security matters. They used to work at eHealth before that whole thing collapsed. So, they were able to, really give us some great guidance. And, in a similar vein, when we expanded to the US, as you also learn a lot on the job. So as you start applying to clients and things, and you go through their security checklists, you kind of learn the law, alongside as you're trying to fill this thing out. And so, and there's always just going to the source law and reading the specific statutes, which, nothing will put you faster to sleep than reading, high trust regulations. But I think partnerships are really important, especially in the beginning, especially in the ideation phase where you're just trying to get good advice from people. And then later on, as you're scaling, more formalized partnerships with either institutions or other businesses. But that's a whole different can of worms. But in the beginning, it's just be humble, assume you know nothing, and just try to like learn as much as you can so that you don't make the wrong steps early on. That's hard to steer back.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, yeah, for sure. Agree with all that. Gabriel, what was your experience, or is you're still running business? What is
Oh,
the landscape in Mexico?
yeah. So in my case, I also started in an incubator. During my college years, there was some incubators on the university, and we applied for it. The idea of that incubator, at least here in Mexico, was you already have an idea and you just need to develop a quick prototype. And then they wanted for you to sell that in 6 months. So I think that would be like really different from what the landscape would be for medicine applications. For example, in the incubator, there were some and entrepreneurs that were trying to do some stuff for track the heart activity, and they had been 3 years working on that, and they didn't receive like the approve. So it was a really long process. In my case, they wanted for us to have the minimum viable prototype in 6 months, start commercializing that. And after that, like if you sell 50 or 100 of those products, then you start looking into the patent and everything. So it was a maybe interesting idea or way of thinking, but it was because in Mexico, not everyone has the resources to maintain a startup for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So they wanted for you to start earning something, some money, some experience, and get the feedback from the clients right away. And after that, then you start looking on all these regulations. For example, in my case, it was mainly the concern was like the batteries and the electronics on the device. But also then you have to start looking into the, for example, intellectual property office and all these like governmental regulators that they will tell you and give you the information that you need to continue with the process. But initially, like the idea was, hey, develop the product and start commercializing. So I guess that's really different, yeah, from maybe other type of products or jurisdictions. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comment that you've made, and I think impactful. So the comment you made is that not everybody is capable of sustaining a startup for indefinite amount of time. Now, interestingly, that applies in any jurisdiction, right? So it's always a burden to try and sustain. But I get your point that maybe in Mexico it's more of a problem, and so in that sense. It is interesting then, and I wonder what was the drive for investment? So approaching investors, because certainly here, most, not all, but most incubators, accelerators, RICs, one of their main goals, I would say, is to introduce you to investors and to get investment on board, which I would say personally, because I've been through it a few times, getting to revenue early is generally a better solution, right? So if you can get to revenue quicker, it's much better than to give away the farm and bring on investors. And so very interesting comment that you made, because if in Mexico they're trying to get you to revenue sooner, that's actually not a bad thing. But it is interesting, like it is different than what is done here, because definitely when you sign up to an incubator or an accelerator, they're going to get you. They're going to put you in front of investors. That's really what they're going to try and do first and foremost, as opposed to drive revenue home first. But is that kind of the concept that the incubator was working with you on that?
So yeah, kind of. For example, we applied for the incubator. We tried to do some devices with Li-Fi, light fidelity, like transmission of information with light. It was like 2014, so that was new technology, and we didn't know if it was going to be successful or not. Maybe it was not in the long run. But so here was the thing: we were developing this to work with solar panels. So the solar panels were receiving the information and they're decoding, and then you store or do whatever you want with information, right? They are not so quick to get the responses. So it was a long-term like research project, right? We were not able to commercialize that right away. So we then proposed to start working with other products that use information, that use solar panels, that use electronics, etc., to start funding that research. So in the long term, we were going to develop this. So that was like the idea. They told us, okay, you cannot stay here for 1 year researching this. So you have to start with something that can be commercialized. Then you start maybe pitching the project to investors. And we did, but we did not like what they were offering us. They also wanted like to control the whole company, to get too much of the company, of the shares. And I was also 21 years old. So, I mean, like I did not have the experience to compete with them.
Yeah.
They were like, yeah. So that's why we tried like the governmental funding, etc. But it did not work. So yeah, the idea was to get to the investors, but we did not have the product that we wanted to pitch to the investors at first. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. Valentine, your comments. And Joe, I know I realize you have to leave soon. If you have anything you'd like to say before you leave, by all means, just jump in. Well, Valentine, let's get a little bit of your comments.
Sure. So I guess for anybody looking to, I guess, get started on that journey, be patient, extremely patient. Startups are an interesting, I guess, exercise in patience. Meaning patience as far as we come out, we're expecting big results immediately, and no, it's a matter of grinding things out over time. Meaning, no, it's gonna be some small successes getting to your actual MVP. But always keeping in mind, I guess, things like I think like our co-panelists were mentioning, don't disregard networking. It's not just about coding. You also have to figure out how to sell it afterwards. Always be humble. That much I will agree to. There's going to be a lot of opinions over the course of what you're building. And the opinions depends on how well you can accept feedback, that you might be able to incorporate that feedback within what you're doing, and take the positive out of them, because not everybody is out there to criticize your product. They're actually possibly trying to help out, and learning from other people's experience. There's I think I don't know if this translates well. No, it's very hard to learn from other people's experiences. And they say only wise people learn how to do that. So yeah, but when we're like 21 or in our 20s, we think we can take over the world by our own, and we don't understand sometimes when folks try to provide some feedback based off of possibly good or bad experiences they've had. Like they say, okay, yeah, there's a hole right there in front of you. Yeah, you're gonna fall into it. Okay, he's walking. Okay, he fell. And those type of things are gonna happen more often than not. But yeah, trying to capture those conversations that you have over the course of time is important. And keep an eye out for what's happening around you. Technology advancements. Sometimes you're trying to I don't know, other expression that we use here locally. You're trying to cover the sun with your thumb, and meaning you're trying to do a lot of things that are possibly might have already been resolved by somebody in research that you overlook because you're so concentrated on getting things done. And yeah, sometimes just taking a breather, keeping your eye or your ear to the ground, looking at what's coming out in the research space, other companies doing similar things that you might be doing. and for you to focus on the differentiators. What are those things that are going to put you apart from somebody else that an investor is actually going to look into? Those are, I guess, the hard things that are very, that I would have loved somebody to have sat me down when I was in my 20s, not anymore, and told me about when I was working on X or Y startup. That would have been super helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, great comments for sure. And so I'll ask you though, specifically in Costa Rica, what do you, how do you feel about the use of incubators and accelerators? How helpful are they in your space? And it will be a little bit of a segue. I'll bug Gabriel as well, but it'll be a little bit of a segue into strategic partnerships, because there's always those two possibilities, right? That you jump into a strategic partnership or something that makes sense, and then they're going to guide you and make, help you along, and or you could be working closely with an accelerator or an incubator with mentors, and they can give you a lot of advice, or you can do both, of course. But the question is, like in our, I guess here in Canada, we're quite privileged. I think we do have a lot of resources available to us. We do have, we can rely on them. They are helpful, not all of them, of course, but a lot of them are. And so then we would probably do a mix. We would be working with an incubator and accelerator, and we would also search for or find strategic partners. But that may not be the case in your jurisdiction. So how do you feel your experience has been in Costa Rica for that?
So as far as incubators, yes, I feel we do have a healthy environment here with regards to both in the academic space as well as the private enterprise that offer this type of help for startups and companies that are coming out with products, innovation, etc. I guess I would, well, if somebody comes along, I had this conversation the other day. Somebody mentioned, well, if you had a tree that makes money, what would you do? It's very hard to say no to early funding, but we need to, I guess, and I'll share this, I guess, a comment from the other panelists. You need to understand when you need funding, or why you need funding, because sometimes the funding, don't let the funding turn into somebody else, some other company trying to direct your company into whatever product they're thinking they can turn you into. Which is it's kind of hard because yes, in the end you have an idea you're trying to build, you're trying to commercialize. And as I mentioned, sometimes we don't listen to the feedback properly, and we kind of we might miss the mark on something big that we had at some point that was ready to go out to market, but we focused on something bigger or something or a variation of that might have been more attractive to us from an intellectual or I guess goal that the company needed to reach. So as far as the investment space for that, incubators, I say we're good. Larger, I guess, larger groups that are looking for assisting startups. Depending on what it is you're in, you might either go for, I guess, private equity. I think it's more or simpler to do. At least in our jurisdiction, then look for like these large investment groups to be able to leverage our startup space in general.
Okay, thanks. Gabriel, what's your experience? Similar or?
Yeah, I mean, well, as Valentin mentioned, I mean, you have to know when you're going to go for funding, but also what are your resources? Like you have time, money, and experience, right? So you have to manage those. In my case, time was really important because I was studying, I was doing this startup thing, I was doing like many things, and I did not have money. So we have starting doing, for example, math courses or things like that to raise money on our own. But that then diminished the time that I have to work on the startup. So I mean, maybe there you have to balance, hey, what do I want to spend time and money or my experience? Because maybe another person can give these math courses, but no one can do like the managing of my startup, of the developing of the product, right? So in that case, yeah, maybe private investors would be a good idea. We unfortunately did not find like good ones, but I guess those are the ones that we meet with the most. Like we have like 5 or 6 serious like investors that were or offered us some money. So yeah, it's similar to what Valentin said.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so just to be mindful of time because we're running a little behind. If anybody has questions for Valentin, for Gabriel, for Joe, because we can send it along, please put them in the chat. If you have something really important right now to ask, please do put your hand up and ask. But if not, I am going to start creating the workshop rooms, and you are welcome to join all three at any time. They're all going to run concurrently, and I'm just making sure that my options automatically. Oh yeah, allow participants to choose room, allow participants to return to the main session anytime, so you can move to anywhere you want. How about that? All right, yeah. So we're good. So we're good on the options. Okay. And so workshop 1 is maximizing the value of AI. So let me create that. No, I'm not going to assign. I'm going to let you assign. There we go. Add a room. Here we go. Now we have workshop 2. You just have a look on the schedule, but workshop 2 is AI in action. Sorry, I'm just doing this right now, but when we, and I'm going to open them up, okay? Rename, here we go. Sorry, workshop 3. There we go. So, if you have any questions for the panelists, thank you very much, by the way, to the panelists. That was most appreciated. Joe had to drop off early for a meeting at 2. Valentin, Gabriel, who are left, thank you very much for joining. It was great comments from you. If you have any questions about a startup in any jurisdiction, but in particular in your jurisdiction, please reach out to them and ask a question. You can also add those questions to the chat. So I'm going to open the 3 rooms, and they should all be open. So then you guys can please join a room, and then the workshops will get started. Now let me just make sure we're good. So for my planning committee, can you make sure that we're good? Like you can join and stuff like that. Like make sure I haven't done something wrong. And then for the workshop leads, if you could please join a room, that would be fantastic. And we'll just let people slowly trickle into the rooms, which should be starting soon, I would hope. And then we'll have the rest of the hour. So we're going to go to about 3 o'clock to work on the workshops. And as I said, for the workshop leads, just run your workshop as you see fit. Don't worry about having to repeat it for people that are going to be joining. That's okay. It's really not a big deal. But we'll let people join, and I think that's just happening now. So workshop should be Giancarlo, so he'll be joining. There he is. There he's joined. Excellent. So give it a few minutes. We'll just let everybody join, and then we'll get started. Okay. So Gabriel, you are in your workshop. No, you're helping with the alumni after, correct?
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
no problem.
Lots of things going on, but you're welcome to join any of the workshops by all means.
Great. Yeah,
By all
sure.
means.
Thank you.
So workshop 1, just as a reminder, while you guys are joining, workshop 1 is maximize the value of AI, and that's with Ernest and Dr. Romero. And then workshop 2 is AI in action with doctors Atsuhiro Hibi and Michael Cusimano. And then in workshop 3, it's with Giancarlo from the UCR and myself, and that's delivering AI solutions in resource limited settings. So if you guys could please just pick your your spots which you'd like to work on, that would be great. And then we'll just get started, okay? All right, so we're all just getting back from the breakout rooms. Hopefully that went well. Let me see. Okay, we're all coming back in. Awesome. Not sure if we're all back. We're almost all back. But that's great. Oh, sorry, I wasn't able to work. Oh yeah, no worries. Okay. So now it's just a debrief. I'm cutting it a little bit short just so we can get a break in. Just because I know it's kind of a long day, and we weren't able to squeeze a break in, but I thought I would take the opportunity to do so because the workshop rooms were a little bit smaller. So I'm going to put in a break before we go to the alumni forum. But thank you all for participating in the workshops. I hope your workshop was as interesting and animated as workshop 3 that we did. And so the purpose of this debrief is to just share a little bit of what the workshops were able to come out with. And so you're welcome to choose someone. I'm going to guess it's going to be one of the leads. Been there, done that before in teaching, and it's quite hard to have a volunteer student or participant to jump in and give an overview. So maybe I'll ask one of the leads or both to go through kind of what was discussed and maybe some interesting action points or stuff that people can walk away with. First and foremost, I would just like to say, like I did at the very beginning of the conference, that I know because we kind of done this before. It's very hard to hang on to participants for a whole day, especially on a virtual conference. So please be mindful. Yes, we started with 70 people present, and now we're down to a smaller number, but that's okay. That was planned. So and also I'd like to just say right now, I would like to thank all of the workshop leads for their participation before I forget. Thank you very much for joining, especially Michael Cusimano, who I believe is in Italy. So he's definitely making some time from afar. So that's great. So I'm going to ask workshop 1 to debrief. That would be wonderful. And just give us a little summary of what was discussed and any kind of interesting points that came up.
Dr. Roberto, do you want me to debrief or would you like to do it? Great. So the title was Maximizing the Value of AI. We had learning objectives. We talked about a couple of examples for understanding the trade-offs between the broad AI integration versus a specialized AI application. We discussed about a foundation model for segmenting anything versus a brain tumor segmentation model, which is specifically trained for a narrowed AI application. We highlighted a couple of concerns. Of course, these two are very different. We need different computational power. We need different amount of data to support these two models. And we also highlighted that even the expertise of the developers is going to be very different. For a foundation model, you need a more diverse team. And we also talked about 2 other scenarios. One was mental health assessment chatbot versus a rare disease diagnosis. And we kind of iterated over all those concepts in terms of computational power, data, expertise. And finally, the role of scalability was discussed. We compared GPT versus ChatGPT. So imagine you have an LLM, which is great, but now you want to deliver it to a very wide spectrum of end users. And so we discussed all the concerns from technological point of view, servers, again, different expertise we want. And the workshop was concluded with two interesting points from the audience and from us. One was ethical issues within this framework. So ethics for narrowed AI versus widespread application. And also we talked about the possibility of having a hybrid design where you have a central brain, which is the widespread AI, and then we plug into it different or multiple specialized AI applications.
Wow. You guys went through a lot of stuff. That's fantastic. Yeah. So can I just ask because I know this is an area that you know well, and that is you made the distinction at the beginning between segment anything model, so SAM, and compared it to a segment specific for the brain, right? And so my question to you is, where are we headed? Because when SAM came out, the idea was literally segment anything model, right? And the concept was really cool. And then I know when we tried to implement it, it wasn't that great, right? Like it really wasn't that great. So we were a little bit disappointed. We were like, oh, bummer. This is really not segment. I mean, of cats and dogs, it works extremely well. But it didn't. So my question is, where are we headed? Like, is the emphasis going to be to actually get Sam to be Sam, or not? Like, in your opinion, what do you think?
This is my personal opinion, and I would like to hear more from Dr. Roberto as well. I think there will be parallel effort. One cohort of researchers, companies, etc., will try to make a real SAM. So that will be one avenue. The other thing will be application-specific models, and at the end, these two meet at somewhere.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that as well, for sure. Yeah. Dr. Romero, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, actually, I was given an example, which is related to diabetic retinopathy, in which the ophthalmologist is interested in detecting small lesions, which are called microaneurysms. That means these are very small segments of images, which are micrometers. So in that case, a hybrid model is useful because the general model is useful to discard a lot of regions in which we are not going to look for these small lesions. But then in the end, the specialized model is the one that is going to find these specific lesions.
Interesting. So that's good because you both concur. So that's good. Both being the leads. That's fantastic. But I agree with you, and that's very interesting. I like your example. That's I wouldn't have thought of that. That's a very interesting challenge, right? That's going to come up more and more, right? As we get better and better resolution and whatnot. So very, very interesting. Just be mindful of the other groups. Thank you. There'll be time for questions after. Let's move on to work group 2. And so that would be Atsuhiro or Dr. Hibi and Dr. Cusimano. If I don't know who would like to take on the task of summarizing.
Yeah, I will summarize it just a bit, and Dr. Cusimano can add a bit more. Basically, in our workshop, we discussed gaps between the level a development and a deployment in real world medical practice. And we used AI prognostic models for traumatic brain injury because, in order to make our discussion easier. And basically we discussed three points: data, interpretability, bias, and validation. And I think data is much discussed already, so I'll skip that. And interpretability or explainability was one of the topics that we discussed deeply. Some people say, there might be several black box process, which might be a challenge in deploying a model in medical practice. And in terms of bias, Dr. Cusimano shared his experience from clinical perspective. Maybe he can explain a bit more later. And in terms of validation, I think we spent a lot of time about validation. So the problem is, should we wait until AI matches experts level, or can we use our AI just as a supporting tool for healthcare professionals? That's what we discussed roughly. Dr. Cusimano, could you add a bit more?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, Atsuhiro. I think, I think the question between immediately ready for prime time versus the need for more testing, and it looked clearly that people have a higher standard of expectation for the AI than they do of the human clinician. And people think human clinicians are perfect, but there have been many, many studies showing that human clinicians are susceptible to all kinds of biases. And I think we have this sort of higher expectation of the AI because, and there's skepticism because of the black box nature of things. But if you think of it, the humans are equally biased in some ways, but the difference is that the human has the capacity to take in a broader range of data than what's fed into the AI system, at least initially. And there is a big demand for more and more testing that went beyond what's capable of the human before it would be, quotes, ready for prime time. And we'd have to cover those ethical issues as well. So I think those were the main issues that were raised in our group, and the issue about quality of data, et cetera, were brought up before. But I think there's this skepticism and this expectation that we need a higher standard of the AI than we have as humans. So not even equaling humans would be sufficient to implement.
Awesome. And I actually really enjoyed the marrying of the two of you as leads, because you literally represent the two sides. So, Atsuhiro is a machine learner, and you, Dr. Cusimano, is a surgeon, right? And so it couldn't have been better. And so my question to you both would be, did you find middle ground? So where exactly, as you say, very good comment, actually, that's very true, that the expectations of AI do appear to be higher, right? So that our expectations are higher of it. And so that was what we discussed in our group, and Giancarlo will talk about that in terms of deploying to underserved areas. But the question is there, to both of you, do you see kind of a middle ground in terms of expectations, in terms of how we move forward so we can actually bring it into clinical settings and make use of it? Or will always be a struggle of how we get it in, validated, and adopted?
Maybe I can go because of the clinical
please,
aspect of it. So I think there's always going to be some tension, at least for the near future. But I think the middle ground that I saw was that as long as you're transparent with what the inputs into the system were, And that if you tell clinicians and are very clear to the clinicians that this is solely as an aid, as opposed as to the sole mechanism to use it, I think the discussion was basically saying that's probably okay. But even then, there was some skepticism as whether the models would ever be good enough for prime time. So one of the participants really questioned it. I think like anything else, we have tools that help us. For example, when you do make a diagnosis, you bring in laboratory data, MRI data. You don't base the diagnosis solely on one data form. And I think here we won't base the prognosis solely on one AI modeling system, but as the data improves and improves, it'll eventually be multidimensional and capture the dimensions that human beings are using now, and I think go beyond it eventually. Hiro, do you have any comment?
Yes, I fully agree with Dr. Cusimano's perspectives. And one thing I would add is that one suggestion would be a showing a successful cases or showing a successful stories might be a good not solution, but a way to persuade or encourage a more clinical clinicians or healthcare professionals to be interested in our AI, because it's very natural that people are afraid of a AI that they haven't used before. So showing any kind of successful cases or showing any kind of successful stories about the use of a prognostic AI might attract more people, and it may encourage people to be more interested in the use of AI.
Thank you both. Actually, that was fantastic. That was great. And by the way, to all the workshops, when we do this again next year, I may kind of take turns in putting the workshops in the morning and then more panels in the afternoon, just to see if we can mix it up a little bit. But anyway, last but not least is workshop 3, and I'll ask Giancarlo to give us a little summary of what was discussed.
Yeah, well, in this workshop we talk about all the challenges to the researcher for AI in rural areas. Well, it's some kind of fun, but it's some good news that we have people from Canada, Mexico, and Costa Rica, and we have the same problems. In key points, the language for indigenous people or populations is so important. So you can try to have your AI model, but you have to engage people to them. So, well, there is some strategies that are shared in these jurisdictions to try to make people be part of. Other stuff that is important to say about this workshop and well that we were sharing is the limitations that they are normally have. Well, I was so impressed that here in Canada there are some regions that they don't have cell phones, because for me, well, I think that people also in Mexico, normally they don't have access to the network or signal in their houses, but they have a cell phone, a smartphone. So, well, I think that is a great challenge to try to implement some AI if you don't have any device in which people can use it. And then, as last point, well, normally we try to create some idea and get it into an app or some application for health, especially in the lab, okay, or in the university. But we have to be associated with leaderships in the communities to be more efficient in the implementation of our idea. So, for example, in Mexico, they have some people that translate for for the app or the projects. Also, we have it in our project in Costa Rica. And well, people in Canada, they are trying to have some people of the community be part of. So like, if I have to say like 3 words, engage, community, and challenge is the summarize our workshop. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. That was Serena brought that up from her work in BC, and I thought that was very interesting too, because I hadn't thought of it, that you know, we may actually have you know, a challenge that is not as big a problem in Costa Rica, or maybe even in Mexico for that matter. And the reason for that, I think, is distance and travel. So in Canada, we're such a large country and we have population all over the country, that we have the additional problem that you can't just travel to somewhere where there's signals, because that's what's happening in the villages in Costa Rica, is they have a cell phone and they realize there's no signal in their village, but then they walk to where there is a signal. And it's because they're capable of doing that, right? But you know, in Canada, you have, there's a lot of communities up north that you can only fly to, right? Or you can only drive to during the winter when the roads are frozen, right? And so there's an additional challenge that we didn't actually think of. So that was very interesting that came up. So I love that part of the discussion that came up for sure. And then the other, of course, what was just fantastic is just you know, the challenges of implementing AI when you know, you really do need human input, and that's the part I'm enjoying personally, because I'm a data guy, right? So I've been statistician, data my whole life, computer guy, geek, you know, behind the computer my whole life, and so I'm just now realizing, wow, this is really neat, that I'm finding an area of research where I actually do need to interact with a human in order to do my research. And I thought that was just very interesting, that more so than in you know, a diagnostic, you know, a tertiary care hospital diagnosis, where the interaction is not necessarily as needed, for the work in rural communities, it's crucial, right? To actually, because that's what you're doing, you're supporting the community, so you really do need to you know, to engage. Anyway, I thought that was great. That was it was a fantastic discussion. So thank you all for participating in the workshops. I think they were great. The nice thing about this is it's been recorded, yay. So all of this is not lost forever, and it will be shared with, there were actually many participants that have reached out and said that they would like a recording. Because they would like to review it because now they're working, or they had to go somewhere or whatever. So that's fantastic. So once again, thank you very much to all the leads of the workshops. That was most appreciated. Your time was most appreciated. And hopefully we'll see you again next year for our follow-up conference. But next for us now is we're going to take a break, because people need a break. And I know when we come back, it's going to be the Global Classrooms Alumni Panel. So we'll probably, the numbers will dwindle more, which makes sense, because, and that's the reason we did it this way, is we're just following up on people that have been part of the Global Classrooms program since the beginning, and we're going to get some feedback off that. And then it will just be the end of the conference. So for those of you who, you're all welcome to join, of course. But inevitably what we're going to be talking about is the Global Classrooms program, how we can further it, how we can expand it, how we can have more fun doing it. And then that will close out the conference. So thank you all for joining, and I will see most of you shortly, like in about 15 minutes, or I'll join back on. Just have a break, go walk around, get a breath of fresh air, have a snack, you know, do some jumping jacks, and then come back and we'll finish off the conference in you know, around 3:30. We'll finish it off. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. And we'll get started momentarily in a couple of minutes. All right, so let's see who's. Krista should be here. Let's see if she's in. She is. Fantastic. Is Joshua online? Not yet. Giancarlo, maybe if you could ping Joshua, that'd be awesome. Gabrielle is online. Fantastic. Kosar is here. Yay. Wow. Wow. You must be tired, Kosar. And Angie. Angie.
No, Pascal, Angie and Joshua are right now in the internship, so they sent me a message that they cannot be part of.
Oh, both of them can't come.
Yeah, they are
Oh,
like
that's too
in
bad.
the
Okay.
hospital right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No worries. No worries. Yeah, yeah. All good. I get it. No worries. Okay, but the rest of the gang is here. That's great. For the rest of you, I'm assuming you're here because you're interested in the Global Classrooms program in general, so that's great. You're welcome to participate in that. That's fantastic. We can probably make this a little shorter than what was scheduled. We'll just see how we go to chat. And then the open forum, yeah, that was kind of wishful thinking on my part, that people would hang out until 4 o'clock, which I guess in hindsight, it makes sense that you're not really going to have that happen. But anyway, we're learning in this. So, okay, so why don't we just slowly get started? Is my team back? No, Ravinia should be here. Yeah, you're welcome to turn on your cameras if you want. You don't have to, but that would be nice just because it's a smaller group. And can everybody hear me okay? Everything's good? We're back online. It's good? Yeah? Awesome. So this is really an easy session. Really, it's just to get a little bit of a debrief on the Global Classrooms program in general. So obviously, our interpretation of the program. It's not like the program's new and it's been around for a while with the University of Toronto, but it's more our participation in the program. As well as today's conference, just to get a little bit of feedback from people who have done this, been there, done that, would be nice. And so that's it. There's no formal structure to it. I'm not going to force you guys to go out into breakout groups, but that will be yeah. We'll just kind of leave it at that. So I'll get it started. Let me just make sure everybody's back on. I've got Giancarlo's smiling face right in the middle here. Because he still hasn't turned his camera on, so he's still stuck on my screen. Yeah, there we go. That's awesome. Okay, so yes, in a nutshell, let me tell you a little about the initiative for Global Classrooms. So Global Classrooms, the purpose is to internationalize, as they say, teaching and experience, possibly experiential learning for students at the University of Toronto and, of course, students abroad. That's the whole purpose of the Global Classrooms initiative. It's nothing new. Lots of most, I'd say, universities have something similar. The distinction with this and learning abroad, so that the expression of learning abroad, that's for students that go on exchange, right? So for instance, Gabriel, who's here, that's what he did, which is great. And I know his university promotes that, I guess is the best way to say it, that graduate students are almost expected to go and spend some time abroad, out of the country, and come back with new experience, which I think is fantastic. So for us to receive students like Gabrielle, it's called the International Visiting Graduate Student Program at the University of Toronto, IVGS, and it's a successful program. And Gabrielle was my first, but not my last, because we've had a few other students following in his footsteps since, which has been fantastic. That is different than the Global Classrooms, which is more a virtual environment. So it's a technology-enabled program, which means that we want to be able to internationalize, so to speak, but with the use of technology, right? So obviously, since COVID, the big push has been virtual settings. As you all know, virtual settings is always a challenge. Like it's just inherently, it's a challenge. And so that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit today, which is to get a little bit of feedback from you guys. Hopefully you attended most of our conference today, and you'll be able to have a little bit of feedback there. And that's it. That's all I'm asking of you. My personal reflection, I find it very hard. So hybrid classes, which we've been doing for years now, AI in medicine and startups in the medical sciences. We also did a little bit of stats. I find what's challenging is fairness, right? Because inevitably, if I'm teaching to people in person, which is great, the people who are online or virtual, I'm not saying they're getting a bad deal, but they tend to be ignored a little bit, right? Because they're online, right? And they're not in front of you. So it's difficult. And, with the technology, yes, we have sound bars and all that stuff, and it works quite well, and the sound is good, and you get a picture of the class, but it's tricky. And so I just find it hard, and I feel kind of bad for people who are online, right? Now, having said that, today we've just done a conference that's all online. Everybody's online. Literally everybody is online. Not to bias your results, but I think it went fairly well today. Once again, I knew from the beginning attrition was going to be a problem, because that's just the problem. It just is. If we have ways to avoid attrition, I think we should think of them, because the afternoon session inevitably was not as well attended as the morning. We had about 170 registrations in all. I think, I can't confirm because I don't have the numbers yet, but the highest virtual presence was probably about 70, maybe, right? Which, jokingly, as part of the, organizing group, we said probably about half would be a good number to have show up. And we were a bit under that. So, wow, right? I mean, and don't get me wrong. I do the same thing, right? So I sign up for stuff and I don't show up, or I only show up for a little bit and whatever. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it really definitely is something to think about on impact, right? So it'd be very interesting to see, how impactful an event like this is compared to an in-person event. I would suspect if we held an in-person event, it may even be more disastrous. Really, I think even less people would show up. And I've been there, done that with IMS events. There's 750 IMS students and you get 15 to 20 that show up, right? Really, and so, for us to get, and I'll get the numbers, right? So 65 was the morning number about, but it kept changing, right? People were dropping off and people were coming on and people were dropping off. So it kind of hovered around 65. And then in the afternoon, which makes sense because there's workshops and stuff like that, it was like around, 45. We lost about 20. And then as it progressed, it just dropped off more and more and more. And then now, of course, now is very, specific, right? So that's fine. And so it's just interesting, how impactful a conference like this is. And I would love to hear from people from Mexico or from Costa Rica. What do you think of it? You know what I mean? Like, it's already hard enough as it is for our local students to hang on and attend. I'd love to get some feedback on from the UCR, from Costa Rica, UDLAP in Mexico. Is it the same thing? Do you have the same challenges? Do you have some secret way of getting people to attend, virtual online activities? Anyway, there we go. That's it. There's my background, and I'll open it up. Anybody can say anything anytime. Go. Any comments? Not all at once. Anybody have anything to say? Any kind of comments they'd like to make in terms of from
Can I
today's?
Can I jump in?
Of course. I was waiting for you to.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for organizing today's event. It was very fruitful event, I think. And first, because it is online, so it's so flexible. We can jump in anytime, we can jump out anytime, and the good thing is we could talk with people from various kinds of background. Some are from a clinical, some are from machine learning, some are from stats, some are from other fields. So I think this kind of conference can be a good starter to start constructing a new network and start new projects and start new research. So I hope this kind of project will continue next year as well. And I also hope that we can create a new project through this conference.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting perspective for sure. Like networking. Sorry, my dog's saying hello to you guys because it's been a long day, so she's been quiet all day. No, it's because I've been muted all day. But no, yeah, that's an interesting concept. I hadn't thought of that actually. The networking and a collaborative project idea. Yeah, that's kind of cool actually. That would work really well for what we do. Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's great. Yeah. Good point. Good point, actually. That's interesting. Because that's what we need to think about is our takeaways, right? So what can people walk away with, from this event? And so, yes, they've listened to some speakers. Fantastic. Good for them. They've got some new knowledge. Okay, great. But yeah, that's interesting that we could, you're right. If we were to think of ways to increase the networking or the possibility of collaboration, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and also, we can, if possible, we can make it a partial, in-person event. So if, anyone can join in person, then we can get together. Currently, some of the participants are in Toronto, but we join remotely. But, we can get together, for example, in U of T or somewhere else to make our discussions more smoothly.
Yeah. I mean, the concern, of course, is, as I said, when you have hybrid, you tend to lose focus on who's online.
True.
But you're right though. That is an interesting way to do it. Like if we made like satellite little groups, where they come together, then that's fine because the presenters would still be online. Let's say, so we don't make one big hall, where everybody meets. You could make little groups, like, a little group in Costa Rica, a little group in Mexico, a little group in U of T that kind of group together, but the speakers and the panels and all that is still online, right? So then you don't lose the focus. Yeah, that's interesting. That's another great idea because that would encourage people to stay. Because you'd feel a little bit bad sneaking out of the room because on online you can just mute yourself and go and start cooking or take the dog for a walk. Who's gonna know, right? But if you're actually in a classroom, then it's more awkward, right? Yeah, to leave. Yeah, wow, yeah, interesting comment too. Yeah, for sure. Gabriel, yeah, you have a comment.
Oh yeah, so I really enjoyed this format. It was really good. And I also was impressed to see some people that I know from UTLAB. So they are, I think, PhD students, and they have been in the Global Classroom, and they have been in different conferences or these talks that we have been doing, and they keep coming back. So, I mean, they are like a Mexican group that already are interested in these topics. And as you mentioned, and Natsuhiro mentioned, maybe, I don't know, Roberto could tell us more, but since they are all in the PhD program, maybe there could be like some, I don't know, classroom or something that they make available for them to go. Because I know there are new students that may not have been in the Global Classroom, etc., but they might like to participate, and that might be easier. Also, if they see like their classmates going to a conference and they say, okay, I want to go through. So maybe something that we can discuss with Roberto. I am not longer in that lab, but yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Roberto might have a comment.
Hi. Well, I have been inviting students from undergraduate students and graduate students. Undergraduate students are mostly are studying biomedical engineering, and they are second year, third year. And usually they they would like to have more knowledge about their major, their learning outcomes. I usually tell them that biomedical engineering is the application of a lot chemical sciences, electrical engineering sciences, computational sciences, and I explain to them that lately artificial intelligence, which is statistics, which is mathematics, because most of the time students question mathematics, what is useful for. Okay, so I tell them these classes, all that you are learning here, in here you can understand what's the usefulness of all these sciences in your studies. So I invite them to take this class by telling them you are going to learn how artificial intelligence, what is artificial intelligence, how artificial intelligence is statistics, mathematics, it has to do with computational, with programming, and you are going to see how these sciences can be applied in solving medical problems. And they will have a broad view of how medicine problems can be solved by using technology, and how technology and sciences can be applied in these medical issues. And also another situation, another topic that I tell them is that this is an opportunity to collaborate not only with students from the same university, but with students from different parts in the world, and that they are going to be part of teams with the students from Costa Rica, from Canada, and they are willing to be part of these teams.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, well, great. That's great feedback for sure. Both Gabriel and Roberto, that's very very helpful. I think that's great. We can certainly expand as much as we can, including, like, for instance, this conference yearly. Why not, right? And then we can invite, as you can imagine, for the first conference, all the speakers were good friends. Kind of makes sense, right? Because we want to make sure they show up and all that kind of stuff. So, but in the future, when we do new conferences, we can certainly start to expand a little bit and invite people that are not necessarily buddies, that I can kind of, leverage to coming out, which would be nice too. So for sure. Krista, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. So first things, I agree with the event being more virtual, especially since the concept is more so global classroom, so it'll be difficult for it to be in person.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I think we could also add for next year is one thing, at least for me, something I don't really understand as someone who's not really in the realm of AI. We always just collaborate with someone who works on AI. So for example, when we need something AI related, we just always call Boang or Chris McIntosh, and that's pretty much it. But no one really understands how collaborative AI really is. It's not just that one person who does the machine learning. There's always other people, for example, clinicians or other scientists who are also involved. Like for what Roberto also mentioned, mathematicians who are also involved. I think we could also highlight that for another conference. And the other thing I wanted to add as well is in terms of attrition, I think I do realize that with virtual conferences, attrition is always a problem, but maybe one thing that we could do is make it more interactive. For example, like since it is a global classroom, for example, I don't know anyone, for example, from Costa Rica, then maybe we could do like a lunch and learn type of thing where there's one event that says, I don't know, like meet a fellow grad student from Costa Rica or something, learn their projects and things like that, something like that maybe.
Yeah, interesting. So for sure, that's a great idea to have a little bit more interaction that way. I think one of the challenges we'll have to address is how do you do that technically, like technologically, just because Zoom, yeah, you can have breakout rooms, which do work fairly well. Today, I realized that the problem of self-assigning is that it's great to have people self-assign, but the problem is they don't. So I don't know if you guys realized, but I waited. But then once people were not assigning, I just arbitrarily assigned people to balance the three groups. And I had to. And it kind of woke them up and they kind of went, oh, And then right after I did that, I don't know if you guys saw, a bunch of people switched, right? Because they kind of went, oh, no, I'm not in the right room, right? So it's just interesting that tech-wise, it gets a little tricky. So you're right, lunch and learn would be cool, but how do you do that, right? So would it be breakout rooms? Would it be, I'm not sure. But I love the idea. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think a breakout room would maybe work, but maybe it's
Mhm.
something that we could assign, like during registration, is this some workshop that you
Yeah.
want to attend? There's also a platform that we used in the past. I forgot what it's called now. It's been a while, but it's also an online platform, but it's like graphic based. So students
Yep.
can kind of walk around and look at posters and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually considered it for this conference as well. And one of the problems was the cost. And so the cost was a little prohibitive in the sense that you had to sign up for like a yearly membership and stuff like that.
I see.
So it was a bit tricky. We looked at two products and it was just for a first time, we were like, well, do we really want to invest this kind of money? Because it was in the thousands of dollars to do it. And so we said no. But you're right. Maybe now that, hey, we've done it once and it was fairly successful, maybe we can. Yeah, you're right. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been to them and I've used them and all that stuff, and they are kind of more cool for sure. But you certainly need a slightly larger group in order to justify it, right? So meaning if our registration, if everybody showed up, then we could justify it. Like 170 people in one of those platforms is fantastic. But, to only have about 60, 65 roaming around the platform and it costs you thousands of dollars, it's not super cost effective. But certainly, yeah, we can certainly consider that. Yeah, yeah. Kosar.
Hi. So I really liked Chris's idea, and I think one easier way to facilitate that might be through Slack. I have been on some virtual events that so I've been sorry, I got distracted with my hand will be lowered soon. So I've been on some virtual events that beforehand when we registered, they asked us to join a Slack channel. So we were able to talk and interact with the people who are attending. So maybe beforehand during registration, there could be a Slack channel so people could interact and get to know each other, and maybe they can have a little assignment of, hey, bring your collaborative idea to one of the workshops or to the lunch and learn so we can talk about it. So that maybe can help with the attrition.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm just trying to really think on how the dynamics of how that's going to work, right? To create these lunch and learn groups or these groups but you're right. I mean, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, no, okay, sure. I think it's worth definitely exploring to see how we can do that. Absolutely. And maybe, rearranging the agenda a little bit to minimize attrition in that sense. I mean, I think today was pretty par for the course. I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I actually think we did quite well. So I've been to so many other events where the attrition is way worse, right? And people don't show up. So I actually think we did quite well. And the feedback so far that I've got has been very positive. So, which is fantastic. But you're right. Maybe we could rearrange it a little bit and maybe look to. I like the idea that you guys are saying. Absolutely, these little groups. I think the undergrads who attended from U of T would be all over that. They'd love to do that, right? To plug into groups. And so if you had almost like poster sessions, right? So instead of poster sessions, you have these breakout rooms, right? Where you talk about your research or something like that. I think I think I agree with you. I think that's a great idea. And if we include it in the registration, so way before, right? we can put it out almost like an abstract submission. You know what I mean? Like a little bit, like there wouldn't be any need for any major review or anything like that. But you're right. You could have people, students from the different universities saying, yeah, I'd love to talk about my work. And they could set up a breakout room. Because I know in Zoom, actually, I think you're permitted up to like 100 breakout rooms. So there would not be a limit. And then even if only a couple of students meet, show up in a breakout room, it doesn't really matter, right? Because that's I think that's fairly easy to do. I think that's great. Yeah, great idea. Yeah. Atsuhiro.
This is just my idea, but why don't we call for company sponsors to address financial issues? A lot of companies are willing to get in touch with students, and some students would love to meet companies, and companies are happy to donate some money to join the conference, and the money can be used for like expensive platforms for meetings, for example.
That's a good question too. That's a great comment as well. And we have done that before for events, and you're right. Companies do take interest in that. I don't know. I've never heard of them sponsoring a virtual event, but you're right. Why not? So often what they do for in-person events is they have a booth, right? So they pay for a booth. So then everyone shows up and they have a booth there, and they're, selling their wares or talking about their work. Would they do that virtually? I don't know, but that's a great, why not? Right? We could always ask and just say they could have a virtual booth. They could even have a presentation, something
or
like
not
that,
booth,
right?
but we can let companies to make companies make presentations, for
Yeah,
example.
make a short presentation or something. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's another great, another great comment. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna check. Yeah, I'm recording. Yay. Because if I wasn't, all these great ideas, but yeah, Gabriel, yeah. You're muted, buddy.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like the idea of students from Mexico, from Costa Rica, and from Toronto, like sharing and participating in some way. I think that if between one talk and the other, we leave room for like 6 minutes, right? And you have 2 minutes to do an elevator pitch on a project that you're working on or something. And they present like one image, and this is my project, I'm doing this, I'm working on this here in Mexico, that's it. And then another one from Costa Rica, another one from Toronto, and that between each talk, it might be interesting for them to know more people, to maybe get in contact with them and collaborate, or maybe even like just participate and show their projects. It would be nice.
Yeah, so that would be a little bit like speed dating, and you could have it by groups, right? So meaning you'd have breakout rooms by category or something like that. So you would group together, maybe, as you say, if it's a 3 or 5 minute pitch, you'd have maybe 4 or 5 per presentations per room, and each room would be a theme, right? There'd be something going on there, and then people could join, and they would learn all the, because then people can just choose what they would like to hear about. Yeah, wow, that's even better, really, than just having the one. Because I get it. If there's only one, then you're done, right? But if you have like shorter presentations per room, and then everyone can talk about it, and then as you say,
maybe so I mean, for example, when I was working in my PhD, the way that I ended up in this topic is because I was talking with someone from Yale, and he told me, hey, this research should be focused on this because this is really needed, right? So maybe this is a way to do that. It would be interesting.
Yeah, that might tie into, I think it was Chris was saying as well, for minimizing attrition, right? Because if you do bring in the very least, if you bring these 5 people together of a similar topic and they're doing their presentations, at least they would stay together, regardless of who came to hear them, right? So then you're right. There'd be a little bit more, or less attrition. Yeah. Interesting. Wow, awesome. All great ideas. I think I'm pretty willing to do it again. I think it was, I'm not gonna say it was super easy to set up, but it was very doable. Like it really was very doable, and I think we're lucky. We have a good base of people and collaboration to date that I was able to lean on, right, and leverage. So why not continue it? So yeah, and we have a year to make it amazing for next year. But I think that's a great idea. I really like your ideas. I really do. I think that would be kind of the chunk in the middle, really, like a kind of a lunch thing, but we'll make it like 2 hours or something. We can make it like a larger lunch thing. It also gives people a break, right? So if they want to listen to a certain one or whatever, and then take the rest of the time off, they can, right? And then come back. And then we'll make, some of the afternoon sessions a little bit something that more like a panel or something like that or whatever. Um, yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah, or presentation or yeah. Yeah, no, I like it. And I love the side effects of bringing together all of these students together into groups is that you increase the core of who's going to stay for most of the day. And so it sounds really silly, but it's really very encouraging for people who are presenting that if you have a large core of people that are always going to stay, and then you add on the people that are just staying because they're interested, you actually get a larger group. And it doesn't really matter. Like people don't really care. They just look down and they just want to see how many participants there are, right? And so it always looks it's always encouraging if you have a large number of participants. You go, oh yeah, great, because it is. I'll tell you, I know from personal experience. I get invited to these events and stuff like that, and it's a big event, right? And then you end up with, no joke, 8 9 people or 10 or 12 people, and 3 or 4 of them are the organizers, and you're sitting there and you're presenting with like 3 other panelists or whatever, and you kind of think, really? Really? Like, should I be doing this? And it happens all the time. So it is really encouraging to know that, there's at least, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more people that are there. You kind of feel, oh, okay, yeah, for sure. I'm in here, it's useful. So anyway, that's a great idea to increase that number. So fantastic. Anybody else have any other comments that they would like to share? No? Because we can end here and I can say thank you very much. And you know what? Maybe you guys can remember this as the beginning of some big conference thing. Who knows, right? Could be a big thing. But yeah, let's I'll definitely schedule this in yearly. I think this, it's funny, this time of the year worked out for us because at the University of Toronto anyway, this week is reading week for the undergraduate students. So that was definitely helpful for some students who, they say, yeah, sure, I'll plug, why not? I don't have class, I'll plug in and listen. So this was probably a good time for us to do it. I don't know if in Costa Rica and in Mexico it was a problem, but we can certainly discuss that for the next year. Like if there are better dates, better times. Was that an okay time starting later? Obviously, we're not going to get you to get out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning. But like, was this time okay? Like, did that work okay for you guys? Costa Rica and Mexico-ish?
Well,
Kinda?
for Costa Rica, I think, and for the students, it's like better like start at like 6 p.m.
So evening.
Yeah, in the evening, because some students at 4 p.m. has some classes, so
Yeah, yeah,
it's difficult to them to attempt.
yeah.
And that is kind of a challenge for virtual activities because, well, for us in the UCR, with COVID-19, many courses has transformed to virtually and then return to in-person course. So that change generates an effect that virtual activities are like some extra activity, but
Oh, right.
in-person activity is the one that is priority. So, well, you see it. There are some students like, and it happens a lot, not only with this kind of courses of activities they're about AI or between different universities. It also happens to us with the courses of the program of a study, because students in the morning they have their practices in their hospitals, and then they have some classes, and that classes become virtually to help them. But then, for example, you start to, for example, have some interactions with them, and you can listen that they were in a bus or in Uber or in a restaurant, because I don't know, the mental uh, or they're thinking, they are thinking about that there is like an extra activity, so they don't give the time, and they don't have like a culture that if you have some virtual activity, you have to get like sit down in your room with your computer, have your stuff to get some appointments. It's like you can have in the other way is like having all your only the headphones and you can be anywhere. So right now, many courses have to be transformed in other way to in person,
Yeah.
because well, that's what it happened. And while you are in person, you can do some questions, and
Yeah, exactly.
people feels that they have to be there because there is some kind of
Sure.
afraid
Yeah, they
that
have to
the
be there.
professor will
Exactly.
ask me
Yeah.
something and even get distracted or all that stuff.
So, I mean, it's a good point, and I'll ask Roberto as well. I mean, inevitably, you would suffer the same problem, and we would do as well. I mean, we're a little bit lucky in the sense that it was reading week, so there's no excuse for the undergrads; they can attend. IMS, I mean, if they have clinical duties, there's nothing we can do about that. But you know, the IMS, your graduate students, you can make up your own schedule, so it's not really a challenge. But I understand from your perspective for sure. And so the question would be, we can't do 6 o'clock in the evening your time because it's 8 o'clock in the evening for our time, and we wouldn't be done till like midnight, you know. But the question would be, would a weekend day, like would a Saturday be acceptable, or is that just absolutely not a chance? And you know, that would be the same question for Kazan and Kosar. Like, is that something that the IMS, you know, you think would be okay with, you know, to host a Saturday event? What do you guys think?
Well, okay, let's go.
I think
Anybody?
the Saturday event would be good. I think for IMS, I don't think they constrict it in terms of time, if I'm not mistaken, right,
Yeah,
Kozar?
I don't think so either. Yeah.
Yeah. I know grad
I
students for sure would be able to attend if it's Saturday as well, since a lot of them had classes and also experiments during the week.
Yeah.
But that's just also the other thing I wanted to comment on is October is normally a time for a lot of conferences, so maybe keep that in mind as well for next
Sure.
year in case
Conflict. Yeah.
clashes with others. Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
I think because it is virtual, IMS would be okay with it actually. And I echo what Chris has said. Students will be able to attend more. And October, apart from it being a conference month, it's also the start of a lot of things in IMS. So students are really busy with many events. So they kickstart the magazine events, their hospital events, etc. So for me is also very busy. I think another month would be better.
Okay. Well, especially if we do it as Saturdays and on issue. But yeah, good point. Okay, great. Yeah. Roberto, yeah, please.
The time schedule is okay, I think, because most of the students are here on campus from 11 o'clock Toronto time to 7 p.m. Toronto time. That is this time. People are not around that much because in Mexico this is the lunch time from 4 o'clock Toronto time to 5 o'clock Toronto time. I think weekdays are better because some students are from abroad the city, so they usually go to the return to their home places. And in the case of weekdays, I think the best time is Friday, because most of the students have their classes from Monday, most of the classes from Monday to Thursday. And and usually Friday is not that busy. They usually work on some projects lab. In terms of month, usually the months in which students are less occupied here in this university, if we are talking about this period, are August and September. Usually the last days of October and November, because those are the last weeks of the semester. They are working on multiple projects and multiple events. They have their heads in multiple things. So that is so I think, I mean, in terms of time, I think September is better in terms of audience.
Okay. Great feedback from everyone. It's always difficult finding the right date, of course.
Yes.
But we can certainly take all of that into consideration for sure for the next time. Maybe September already would be probably easier from Krista and Kosa, what they're saying is probably September will be a little bit easier, so we can definitely consider that. And then we, day of the week, we can definitely, reach out a little bit and do some digging where we can work with Giancarlo and find out, when would be a good day during the week and all that stuff. So that's all good. That's all great feedback. So for sure. I generally hesitate on weekends as well. I only ask because I know that's a solution. But I do generally hesitate as well because you're right. I mean, a lot of people travel, right? They go away, they go back home, they go whatever on the weekend. And it's a weekend. So a lot of people say, I don't feel like doing it. But anyway, we don't need to make decisions today. We got another year before we do this again. But certainly we can work on finding a better date for next year. Awesome. Thank you all very much. Anybody else have anything else they want to add before we wrap it up? No, we're good. Okay, awesome. So on that note, I'll just thank you again for joining. I think that was fantastic for our inaugural conference. We'll certainly do our best to make this an annual event, and maybe we can get some sponsorship and we can grow it a little bit and use your creative solutions to attrition and to the best time. But I'll say it again. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I really am. I think we did fairly well. For a first time, we did well, actually. I really do. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm gonna send a survey out, for people that if they wish to give feedback. It's just a SurveyMonkey. I'm gonna email it out directly through the Zoom, the Zoom registration stuff. And it's anonymous. So I'll send it out to, to everybody, and we'll see if we get any responses. I will do that. And then we'll transcribe all of this and all of our meeting. And I'll don't expect it tomorrow, but I'll share that information back with you guys. Okay? Wonderful. Thank you very much. And we will see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.